Time now to connect the dots, and we make the news make sense. Whether you can't get enough or can't wait to throw it out in the trash, everyone has a strong take on candy corn. But there's no denying it is a Halloween staple.
Why is candy corn the most divisive of all Halloween candy? Let's connect the dots. Love it or hate it, candy corn is a staple of Halloween. The tri-colored triangles bring strong responses from its fans and even stronger reactions from its critics. Since it has no contrasting flavors, it can end up just tasting intensely sweet. That can cause palate fatigue, like eating spoonfuls of sugar. There's also the matter of bugs in the candy. The lac bug produces a waxy, waterproof coating used in things from paint to food. It's usually called confectioner's glaze, and it gives candy corn that shiny exterior. But if you are on Team Candy Corn, you're not alone. According to USA Today, 9 billion kernels are produced annually. And you can expect to pay more for candy this year. Data Assembly, a retail price tracker, says prices are up 13% this year. And that's connecting the dots.
Time now to connect the dots when we make the news make sense. More folks are taking sick days at work, and now it's costing companies millions.
In recent years, COVID and RSV have forced some folks to take more sick days, but employers aren't sure that's the whole picture. Let's connect the dots. New payroll data shows Americans are taking more sick days than ever before. Managers and HR execs say this is due in large part to a shift in mentality from younger employees. And it's a culture shift that's been years in the making. Unlike generations past, where workers would have to come into work sick because they were worried they would seem weak or unreliable, younger workers are bucking that trend, getting their rest to feel better. And for the first time, folks are using sick days for their physical and mental health. It's all to help combat things like stress and anxiety. And that is connecting the dots.
Where's the money? WCNC Charlotte.
Where's the money really is about leveling the playing field. It's about helping others and breaking down barriers. We don't want our viewers to be taken advantage of, so we're here to help.
See the difference.
We see ourselves as a resource for the community. A lot of times when people get to us, they've tried all kinds of other alternatives. They've knocked on doors that haven't been answered, or they go to places where there aren't doors. We create openings for them, and that's what we do with Where's the Money.
Right now at 6, a brand new Where's the Money investigation serving as a lesson in renters' rights. Thank you for joining us now for the news at 6. I'm Colin Mayfield.
And I'm Vanessa Rufus. A group of college students scrambled to find an off-campus apartment, but when they moved out a year later, their landlord sent a bill of $23,000.
And the reason for most of those charges, well, the property owner didn't like a table that they made.
I take picture of
what?
You stick.
Where?
Okay, you write it up.
Saying something doesn't make it legal.
Well, we've discovered now this landlord has a history of concerns just like this.
Our Nate Morabito learned property owners could face steep fines of their own for trying to collect fees that are not spelled out in a lease nor allowed by the law.
This $23,000 bill lists 21 charges in all, some for cleaning the apartment and the yard. But then there's a more than $18,000 fine, all because the students refused to remove a drinking game table.
Don't mind the Halloween decorations we have up.
When Tyler Parzielli started his junior year at NC State,
you entrust with your children this life experience.
His mom, back home in Charlotte, gave him the freedom a college student wants, with some parental oversight.
What's the lease? Send it to us. We'll review it. We'll sign it.
But once his parents did their part, the rest fell on Tyler.
A lot of people my age and a lot of people in this position would bend easily.
They've clearly raised an independent child.
He was well within his means to stand up for himself and not be taken advantage of.
This homemade drinking game table is at the center of a back and forth between Tyler and his now former landlord.
She hated that table.
A property owner he says made living here difficult.
$23,000.
And leaving
3 zeros, yeah.
Costly.
The charges were ridiculous.
A joint investigation by WCNC Charlotte and WRAL News revealed when their lease ended. Not only did Tyler's landlord refuse to return his security deposit,
Exterminator dispatched to get rid of rodents due to trash accumulation.
she tacked on hefty fines.
A ruined microwave.
A continuation of a much smaller previous collection attempt when she warned of a possible breach in the lease agreement.
This is a personal preference thing, not an actual piece of trash in your yard.
Through it all, the table Tyler and his roommates built remained a sticking point.
She eventually paid someone late at night to come try and take it from us.
So much so, they chained it up so her worker couldn't take it. As a result, she charged him and his friends $150 for the worker's failed trip, plus $50 a day for an entire year for refusing to remove unallowed patio furniture.
Like over 20 grand. I've never seen something like that before.
Isaac Sturgill is with Legal Aid of North Carolina.
Landlords can't just make up fees and start charging them.
He says the nonprofit law firm routinely files civil claims against landlords who indiscriminately try to collect fees that either aren't agreed upon in a lease or authorized under the law.
The penalties are actually pretty steep.
Sturgill says North Carolina's unfair debt collection law can force landlords to pay anywhere from $500 to $4,000 per violation when held accountable.
Where in the law or in the lease allows you to charge them for that?
The landlord in this case, Lisa Eustatio, told us by phone while the fee amounts were not specifically in the lease, she defends her decisions, saying it's her right to ask renters to remove something she doesn't consider appropriate, describing the table as disgusting. Records show this isn't the first time she's tried to recoup money at the end of a lease.
Slam the door on me.
Sending a letter with thousands of dollars worth of charges to 2 additional groups of students who rented other homes. In those cases, parents say the landlord also kept their security deposits.
It's a name that, as soon as you say it, I know it.
Michael Avery is an attorney with Student Legal Services at North Carolina State University.
For such a small amount of properties, we certainly see an inordinate amount of complaints.
He says the nonprofit has remained aware of this particular landlord for nearly 15 years, a property owner who he says is largely unresponsive to concerns.
Probably the most common complaint that we see from students is they allege that there's been unjust, unlawful, and sometimes even fraudulent claims against the security deposit.
My son knew what his rights were.
Carrie Parziali says she's proud of Tyler for standing his ground. As they refuse to pay the bill,
I'm angry because my child had to live that on a daily basis.
Tyler has moved on.
It was just a wave of relief.
And moved in to a new place.
I was at peace for once.
And he says his homemade table isn't causing any problems here. We requested an on-camera interview with that landlord. Neither she nor her attorney responded to our request. Nate Morabito, WCNC Charlotte.
A really eye-opening piece by Nate Morabito there. We did want to note we learned about this story because someone involved with this story reached out to me about this, and then I took it to our Where's the Money team. So we just want to really highlight that any tips from you at home, this is what sparks solutions journalism. We want to get answers for folks who need them.
And that's part of the job, of course, and why we do what we do each and every day. So we are asking you at home, if you have something that you think our team should investigate just like this, doesn't matter how small, send it to us. You can send an email directly to our team, too. That address is money@WCNC.com.
Well, this school year has been one filled with change, much of it not stemming from inside the classroom, but instead handed down from state lawmakers. North Carolina schools have seen a wave of new legislation impacting the classroom. It ranges from what kind of books teachers are allowed to have to what kind of conversations they can have with students. WCNC Charlotte's Shamaria Morrison joining us now after speaking to students and the superintendent about how these new laws are impacting education. Shay, what laws did you talk to them about?
Well, Jane, one, the Parents' Bill of Rights and restrictions on LGBTQ students tied to legislation that had been passed this year. And we discussed how state and local politics is sometimes a distraction for some students. In an exclusive one-on-one interview with WCNC Charlotte, CMS's Superintendent Crystal Hill says she recognizes politics' place in education.
I have an understanding of the way that politics plays into K-12 education. We have an elected school board, we have elected legislators, we have an elected governor.
And all those elected positions come with cost for education. West Charlotte senior Malachi Thompson says students are not blind to the spotlight on education in politics.
Oftentimes we forget about the students' voices, and all we do is remember the parents and the teachers, but students have stories too.
Sharing student stories is why Thompson is part of Superintendent Hill's student advisory team.
My first encounter with her was she asked me a question. She said, "What does the students want?"
Thompson says political decisions by the General Assembly have hurt his classmates.
I share a classroom with some of our LGBTQ community, and they just don't feel safe.
Over the summer, state lawmakers filed 6 bills aimed at transgender youth, ranging from sports to medical care. Previously stalled legislation that limited LGBTQ+ instruction in North Carolina public schools was also passed this year.
They don't feel safe, they don't feel heard, they don't feel seen. And most of our students don't feel seen in the classroom. So once we provide that opportunity for them to be seen, heard, and viewed, then they can feel comfortable to sit in their classrooms and learn.
Hill has previously said the district will follow the law while making sure all students still feel welcome. She tries to keep her hands out of politics and in the classroom.
I think the best way to do that is keep the main thing the main thing. Schools were designed and developed to impact positively student achievement. Plain and simple, right?
And the district has already seen a hiccup with new laws enacted by the General Assembly. An email circulated to a few school principals, actually, Jane, telling them not to participate in banned books weeks, and that is due to the Parents' Bill of Rights. And this received actually international attention. CMS eventually backtracking, saying they were not taking a position on banned books week, and that participation in it was not a violation or in any way associated with the Parents' Bill of Rights.
All right, so they are being heard eventually, and you brought a lot of that to light as well.
Yeah, we always want to hear from the students.
That's right. Thank you, Shay.
Verify, WCNC Charlotte.
Verify is all about trying to make a difference in the community by making sure that the community has the correct information. This is what we know, and hey, this is what we don't know. Sometimes you're actually surprised by the answer.
Verify the difference.
Verify is a great way to combat that misinformation, making sure that people know the process of the reporting.
Alrighty, it's time to connect the dots when we make the news make sense. Scary movies are a classic Halloween tradition for some, but a popular technique used to scare folks in films is slowly going away.
Horror film fanatics say a common way to scare the audience is becoming almost funny. Let's connect the dots. So for years, movie makers have used jump scares to frighten the viewer. And you've all seen it, the technique that involves that sudden change in an image or the loud sounds that get you out of your seat. Jump scares peaked from the 1970s to about the early 2000s, with cult classics using the technique every couple of minutes. But they're slowly going away. Jump scares in movies has actually dropped since 2014, hitting a 20-year low in 2021. Experts say today's horror lovers can easily recognize the setup for a scare, and it's almost funny to viewers. So it means producers have to get a little more creative and spend less time on those big scares. Today's thrillers focus more on tension building and grabbing the viewer psychologically with scares that linger well after the jump. And that's connecting the dots.
Right now, though, let's talk about a big issue. In Mecklenburg County, on any given night, as many as 3,000 people don't have a place to sleep. And this is a crisis prompting local nonprofit, the Lotus Campaign, to seek solutions.
That's right. WCNC Charlotte's Lexi Wilson joining us live now. And Lex, how exactly does this nonprofit help?
Well, the Lotus Campaign puts people who are homeless into housing by removing barriers. It's something that at times seems impossible, especially if someone has a record. Homelessness has many faces and many stories. This is Mario Johnson.
At times I felt like, just giving up, what's the use, because my situation wasn't improving.
Johnson has been to prison for several charges, including robbery. His drug addiction started at 13, and before last year, he was homeless.
I never truly had a place to myself.
A place to himself, now possible.
It was just like a gift that was dropped in front of me.
Johnson is part of the Lotus campaign's landlord participation program. Lotus guarantees landlords rent. In return, they eliminate things like credit checks and employment records.
Most of the residents that are coming through Lotus campaign on paper are not going to look as great. They might have spotty rental history, maybe poor credit. There could be an eviction.
At the same time, they partner with social service groups to provide ongoing support for people like Johnson, who still works with Hope Haven, an organization helping people battle addiction.
What we're all about is building a strong network of support and also getting rid of roadblocks to housing.
Over the last 5 years, the Landlord Participation Program has housed more than 410 people in Charlotte. They've also supported over 200 lease renewals. The program has a 97% success rate, which means 97% of tenants go on to house themselves without support.
He'll protect me.
Johnson just re-signed his lease for another year in East Charlotte. Inside his home, a sign reads, "Don't quit."
The Lord is my strength and my shield.
He says he's grateful to be rebuilding his life with his family.
Everybody deserves a second chance.
And the Lotus campaign also tries to put their tenants in neighborhoods where they can gain upward mobility. Reporting live for WCNC Charlotte, I'm Lexi Wilson.
Well, I'm going to tell you how it's going to look across the nation today. This is what we're going to see. This is moving in our direction. Notice the extent of the cold air that's tracked into the midsection of the country. We have all kinds of watches and warnings in effect. So the cold air is west of here, but eventually that cold air moves here. And notice the extent of all the frost freeze warnings covering much of the midsection of the country today. As we take a look at our average first freeze and frost for our part of the world, about November 9th in the Charlotte area, but we're going to see some frosty conditions this week over the two-state area as we check and show you what's going to happen this week. It's interesting, you go from a low of 50 tomorrow morning to 35. Then look at Thursday morning, 30 degrees, 32 degrees on Friday. Then we head to the weekend back into the 40s. But a couple days this week, right around anywhere from about 30 to 33 degrees, some frosty weather in effect for the region. Take a look at our 4-camera view. Now tomorrow, probably going to be obscured by the clouds and maybe a little bit of light rain from Dallas or Tower Cam to Kannapolis to Monroe, all the way over to Lake Norman. As you can see, the traffic on 77 looking okay. We'll check with Chris in just a moment to get the latest on that. Enjoy these really mild conditions because every morning this week from now on, it's just the temperature is going to get colder and colder. We're 62 here, 63 at Concord, 59 at Chester, up in the Boone area, 46 there, 61 in Monroe and Charlotte, South Carolina, 63 degrees in the breeze out there. Here's the radar. No rain, no issues here. It's all back in the midsection of the country from the Ohio Valley all the way to the mid-south, a line of some areas of very light rainfall. The good news about this particular system, this frontal boundary, there's no severe weather along it, and we're not expecting any of that. Here's what we saw yesterday. We did make it to that 83-degree mark. 69 is the average high temperature this time of the year. 84, that's a record today set in 1950. We may be close to tying that record today, much as we did yesterday. 81 degrees right around 2 o'clock, 4 p.m. temperature 84, and mostly sunny skies. Tomorrow, our Halloween spectacular, the Bozo bus on the way, 4:30 to 7 a.m. right here tomorrow morning. And the bus is out of the snow, and hopefully it's moving and heading in our direction. It's got a long way to go. Check out that guy roofing 7-day forecast. 84 today. Tomorrow's high, 30 degrees colder, 54 tomorrow on your Halloween. Not a washout for the trick-or-treaters. And then we're in the low 50s Wednesday, Thursday morning, low 32, 32 Friday. Back to the upper 60s and low 70s for the upcoming week.
WCNC Charlotte.
Weather is a kind of science that you get to see and experience every day. And I think some people don't even realize how much it affects them. That weather has a huge impact on how it threatens your family, your livelihood, or your home. So I think it really is one of those defining things we do that really affects everybody in our community.
See the difference.
That process of giving you a warning ahead of time and keeping you and your family safe is really important to me because I live here too. It's my family, it's my friends, it's my neighbors.
Construction work heading to the town of Waxhaw, and it is forcing some detours to the town's busiest roadways. This all happening on Election Day as well. WCNC Charlotte's Miles Harris talked one-on-one with the town mayor, who has more on how drivers can avoid those major delays.
Waxhaw's mayor getting the word out about some road changes that could impact transportation as early as Monday. But his message going far beyond just the roads, but about being on the same page as the community.
So we want to make sure that the 20,000 plus cars a day that go through this intersection can get around our town to allow our people to get into our town.
Mayor Ron Pappas says that town leaders are working with railroad operator CSX and the NCDOT with a plan to keep traveling on Waxhaw's roads smooth, after CSX is getting set to do some maintenance work on the town's railroad crossing.
We all collaborated, got together, developed a different plan that helped us circulate the traffic through town with very little disruption.
The work is set to close the crossing at Route 16 and Broome Street, and the detours are encouraging drivers to take Gray Byram Road, Waxhaw Marvin Road, Waxhaw Indian Trail Road, Collins Road, and McNeely Road. Pappas says that sending out the traffic warning is a part of a bigger plan, connecting and growing with the Waxhaw community.
So we want to make sure that our residents know the process, which sometimes they don't like that word process, but everything in government is a process. And we need to help them understand the process better. You just can't be reactionary, you have to have a plan. I love this town. It's a great town. I love being down here. I live within walking distance. I like that. And our town is something that everybody else wants to enjoy as well, and we'd like to see them do that.
Construction is scheduled to start on Monday and will extend through November 7th on Election Day, which could impact voters' routes to the polls. In Waxhaw, I'm Miles Harris for WCNC Charlotte.
York County gave the green light for a Silfab solar manufacturing site to move into Fort Mill. But some people living in Fort Mill are worried about the impacts that kind of facility will have on water and air quality.
Manufacturing with HAPs needs to be further away from children.
HAPs, or hazardous air pollutants, are a major cause of concern, and the reason behind a public hearing tonight to hear neighbors' concerns. York City Council moved ahead with giving Silfab Solar a tax break to move in before any report was given from the South Carolina Department of Health and Environmental Control.
Don't expect this board to hold up a fee in lieu based off what DHEC is yet to determine.
Silfab Solar still needs permits from DHEC before it can begin operations. The plant would be located behind the DMV and near 2 public schools in Fort Mill. Residents concerned about the toxic chemicals that would be coming in and out of the plant are hoping to make their voices heard and stop operations before they begin.
Alrighty, 5:17 now. A fair warning, you may want to put your breakfast or your morning coffee down for this one. Happy Tuesday. We are once again talking about rats, so I'm going to try to hurry up and get through this. 4 cities across the Carolinas are now topping the list for rattiest cities. Now, before revealing the rankings, here's how researchers measure who's home to these rodents. Orkin, a pest control company, looked at the number of new rodent services in cities across the country. The ranking includes both residential and commercial pest control treatments. Now, right here at home, Charlotte, Raleigh-Durham, the Greenville-Spartanburg area, and Greensboro all break the top 50. The Queen City moved up 16 spots. It now holds number 21. Just under is Raleigh-Durham at 23. Greenville-Spartanburg takes number 32, but the Carolina city making the biggest jump is actually Greensboro. So Orkin says it moved up 17 spots. It's now number 50. For context, surprisingly, New York City is number 3 on the list, LA taking the second ranking, and Chicago comes in at number 1. Guys, this is the grossest news to see and the worst list probably to make.
Yeah, I'd rather just not think about that.
Well, you know what I say.
What?
We beat Raleigh.
Yeah.
So take that, Raleigh.
Come on.
That's right. That's what matters. All right, Kia, thanks.
You dirty rat.
That too.
Hey, listen, nothing dirty about our weather, nothing
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us here for our virtual town hall, if you will, that has all to do with resumes and job hunting and things to kind of set yourself up for success when you are looking for a job. I am joined tonight here by Juan Cerron and Connor Walsh with Talent Bridge, and these are going to be our two experts we're going to ask some questions of this evening. And you both were telling me that you have very much a familiarity with what people on both sides of this pipeline, if you will, are looking for. The employers, what do they want? And the people who are looking for the jobs. One of the things we wanted to show folks first before we dive into things. Now, keep in mind, comment, please let us know what sort of questions you want to know about, beefing up that resume, any questions that you have about getting that job, getting that interview. But we wanted to talk about this because this was prompted by a Where's the Money report that one of our reporters, Jane Monreal, recently did. We showed it to you last night on TV. We want to show it to you again this evening. And it's all about somebody who is on this job hunt. She is sending out all of these applications. She is not hearing a word back. And so this is probably a big red flag to update that resume. So Sean, who is behind the scenes directing, if you will, can we cue up Jane's Where's the Money report here?
Karen Meisenheimer has had a tremendous career as a certified nurse's assistant, but it's physical work, and after 22 years and a recent injury, she can't perform the job as well as she used to. So she wants to go into a different line of work.
I was trying to do like more clerical, more secretarial, more customer service.
She sent out 100 resumes.
Oh, God, probably more than I've sent out a lot. Indeed, LinkedIn, Monster. Some of them I would just look, Google.
None of them called her in for an interview.
And each time my heart just sank more and more and more.
She went to the free career center at Goodwill.
So simply sending resume is not enough. We have to understand the culture of that company, what is it that is important to them.
Although Meisenheimer's background's in the medical field, she's also dealt with patients, family members, doctors, and making sure her clients' needs are met. That was customer service.
Having the ability to understand what are the critical words that allows you to connect to the right position is something that I know we coach our participants to understand.
According to Flex Jobs, it's important to include on your resume keywords also used in the job description.
Thank you.
If you land the interview but don't make it further, a local staffing manager says it's sometimes because of TMI.
When you're asked that lovely question, tell me about yourself, we want to stay in line with what's related to the work or the job that you're going into versus telling about our life for the past, 6 to 12 months.
For executive positions, going to a staffing agency is beneficial.
The old school management style of the 80s and 90s of leading with an iron fist I would say, is gone. And now it's got to be through vulnerability and humility with your people. One of the perks of working with a search firm like us is instead of being one of 300 to 500 applicants, you're going to be one of 3 to 5 that we put in front of a client.
Well, experts also say more companies are looking at your social media, about 70%. So keep it clean. And sometimes there is no time to respond. If an employer gets, say, over 100 applicants for one position, about 20% will get that interview. In studio, Jane Monreal, WCNC Charlotte.
All right, so there's your refresher, folks. I feel like there's a lot to digest there. And so, Juan, Connor, I don't know who wants to jump in here. I mean, is this something that you hear a lot from folks? I feel like I'm qualified. I'm sending out, all these applications. I keep hearing employers are looking for workers. Why am I not getting a call back? Is this a common scenario?
Absolutely, Vanessa. We hear it a lot of the time in our industry where candidates will reach out frustrated because they've sent in their resume to dozens of companies and they don't hear anything back. And I think a lot of that points us to an ATS or an applicant tracking system where a lot of these are really just automated systems going in and looking for keywords on a resume. And it really takes out the human nature of the recruiting process, which can be very frustrating in the eyes of someone looking for a new job.
Yeah, okay. So that then brings up the question here, what sort of keywords should I be putting in there? Because I think maybe people might not know how automated some of these situations are.
Yeah, and that's an excellent question. So one thing that I tell every candidate that I talk to is look at each job description, tailor your resume specifically for that job that you're applying to. If it mentions leadership, if it mentions a specific skill set, make sure that those words are in that resume because as soon as you apply, and it happens even for us as we're searching for candidates through places like LinkedIn or CareerBuilder or Indeed, we're searching for those keywords, and so we want to make sure that your resume stands out above the rest, and it's always about the percentage of those keywords that you have in there.
So maybe this is getting into the weeds a little bit. If I'm putting keywords in and I see in the job listing they have the word leadership, am I using the word leadership versus I was a leader of whatever? Like, do you think it's getting that particular? Like, you got to use an actual word.
Yes, be
Oh.
Which
particular.
is insane. Yeah. A lot of times it just pinpoints that specific word. I mean, people have searches that are set up where they'll oftentimes incorporate words that are similar, but most recruiters that work at a corporate job are just searching one specific phrase and that's it.
Yep.
That is
One,
interesting.
sorry to cut you off. One thing
Oh,
to
no,
add
no, no.
too, one thing to add is a lot of people try to beef up the resume with really big words or words that make their job title sound really lofty. A lot of times keeping it simple is the best way to go. The shorter your sentences and just get to the point of what your job duties and functions are, the better. Because one, people don't have time to read hundreds and hundreds of resumes. So the shorter it is, the better in terms of getting through a lot of them.
So true. Now, you mentioned keeping it simple, and that made me think of something that we heard in Jane's piece, which was TMI. What do we mean by TMI? Like, what exactly is too much information?
I think it depends on the role and the person, especially the job you're applying for. I think there are definitely some extraneous details you can leave out of your resume. You know, say you work a receptionist job, you're a front desk person. You don't have to include every specific thing. Say you ordered office supplies. You don't have to list out every single office supply you ordered. Just keeping it very concise, like Juan said, making it as efficient as possible, and really broad strokes summarizing the work that you did. You don't have to go too deep into the details unless, of course, the job description is looking for a specific thing, then maybe you incorporate that. But
Now, we also heard the suggestion of using a staffing agency. What sort of, I guess, services would you get from a staffing agency? How would a staffing agency set a candidate up for more success versus maybe just going it alone?
So this is where we shameless plug, of course, but not all staffing agencies are made the same. The really good ones like Talonbridge, we take our time with each candidate. We get to find out your story, your background, everything that you've accomplished at work. I always ask candidates to tell me stories of when they, achieved something greater than what their resume may show. And we also help them tailor their resume to each job that we're applying them to. We want to present our candidates, in the best light possible, and so we give tips and advice. We also will do a lot of interview prep with candidates. So things like going through what to say during an interview, what not to say during an interview, how to negotiate, compensation, things that a lot of people don't have a lot of experience in. We go through and make sure that everyone is prepared for each and every interview that we send them to. One other thing too to add to that is I always remind candidates, people are, naturally not good at interviewing. I'm also terrible at it, even as a recruiter. When I'm on the other side of the table, I get nervous, I get, sweaty, clammy, whatever it is. And I always tell people, remind yourself that the person interviewing you is also not a professional interviewer too. And that's something that's important to keep in mind.
Yeah. And I would also suspect, if you are to the point where you're at an interview, this is someone who is interested in you and is taking the time to learn more about you. So it's not like, I mean, there's a reason you're there. So I feel like that could be a good confidence booster to think of as well.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I did want to ask, since we are talking about the interview process, and we were actually kind of talking behind the scenes before we got started with this live stream about this, but a lot of things are going virtual now. And let's say you are going to be doing a virtual interview. I mean, are we worried about what the surroundings are like? I mean, how particular are we getting with this? Are we, like dressing up, the whole thing?
I would say we're getting very particular here. In our industry, we've seen a lot of the crazy stories. We've seen a lot of things firsthand. You always want to be cognizant of, number one, what's in your background. We've had several candidates who have had video interviews that have missed out on opportunities because they've had alcohol in the background or they've had a TV on in the background, like crazy things that they're just not really thinking about because we're getting a glimpse into our personal lives. I mean, you're in someone's home right now, so it kind of can seem like it's all blending together, but definitely put your best foot forward. I would say a video interview is the best way to do that. You can dress the way you want to, you can rehearse what you want to say, you can control your space, you can make sure there's no distractions, and this is the time to be very serious with that.
Yeah.
Now, I'll take a moment to remind folks too who are watching on our social media platforms that you can ask questions. And I say that because I'm seeing a comment from Ashley Strader, who looks like Ashley is watching on YouTube from what I can tell. And it looks more like a comment than a question. So Ashley, if you have a specific question you want to know about, because you've commented situation, interview, question / answer. So if you be more specific, if you have a specific question about that, and our experts will be glad to answer that for you. And thank you, Ashley, for tuning in. So while we await for perhaps more clarity from Ashley or other folks to hop in with their own questions, let's talk about let's continue on the interview topic of techniques. I mean, is there anything that you find yourself commonly reminding folks or telling folks for this interview process?
Simple things, really, really simple things, like don't chew gum while you're on a video interview. It's something that it's crazy to have to say out loud, but people forget that the moment that the camera is on, you are trying to sell yourself and you're trying to make yourself be a part of that company. Things like keeping your camera at eye level, speaking directly into the camera. Those are things that are very, very important. People forget, and oftentimes you get weird angles of holding a phone or something along those lines. We remind folks to make sure that they're putting their best foot forward, like Connor said. Dress appropriately. If you're doing a video interview, make sure that you're dressing up as if you're going into an in-person interview. Make sure that you're thanking folks as you're fielding questions. Take time, pauses. Make sure that you're giving them the ability to provide you answers to the questions that you ask. And make sure that you're tying in your responses to whatever those questions are. Like if they point to let's say a need that the company has, make sure that you're bringing up examples that show how you're going to help them solve the issues that they have at hand.
Yeah, I guess that you brought up the concept of if the company mentions a need, how much research should you be doing on a company before you go into this interview?
That's a good question. I would say you can never do too much research, and preparation is always your friend here. I would over prepare for these situations. That way, you know everything about the company, the culture. You have that ready so you can ask questions targeted toward the company and where they see themselves. Look up the LinkedIn profile of the manager you're meeting with. Always. That's never a bad idea. That way you can tailor your questions and your approach to that specific person as well. It is so much better to prepare for these things than not. And then you risk asking questions that are already answered on the website or asking questions about what the company does. And those things just honestly are disqualifiers from interviews because that shows you haven't taken the time to look at the company that you want to work for, supposedly.
Yeah, that's great advice. That's very good advice. I was actually thinking about as far as preparations. Are there things that you tell people to just totally avoid? Don't do this. Absolutely don't do this. Either maybe it can be resume writing or interview wise. Anything.
There are a couple things that I always say to avoid, especially in an interview, whether it's virtual, over the phone, in person. Number one thing I always say to avoid is speaking negatively about a previous employer. That's a big red flag. Specifically in the eyes of an interviewer, they're going to ask you, okay, why are you looking to leave your company right now? And that's a big time for you to use that situation and pivot it toward the future. Here's what's pushing away from our organization. And it could be something as simple as, hey, I've been here for 5 years and there's no room for growth because my manager will never leave and the organization is very flat, whatever the case is, but have that ready, but then quickly pivot away to what's pulling you to this company. Right? I saw this company has openings here, here, and here. This aligns with where I see myself in the next 5 years, and I'm excited to contribute to their growth. Always be thinking of the push and the pull, and don't just be like, well, I hated my last job.
One thing too, I always tell candidates is make sure after the interview, send a thank you note. A short email, a short PDF document, anything that you've got to send to an interviewer and thank them for their time. Also, make sure that you button up your LinkedIn profile. Can't tell you how many times people have been disqualified, not only from LinkedIn, but also from Facebook profiles or, Instagram profiles that are public. And suddenly, there's a bad light that's painted on you, even though you did a great interview, it won't matter.
Yeah, great tips there. We are starting to get some questions from folks watching at home. Rhonda is asking, how do you handle a huge gap from your last job on a resume? And she's specific here, 3 years or more, and it's because of a health issue, which I feel like maybe a lot of people can relate to with what we just went through the past 2 years. So what was your recommendation for that?
I think that we're at a time now where organizations are recognizing that they need to be human. Just like Matt said in that piece, right? it's not an iron fist. We're not going to question, all your personal reasons, but have a good enough solid reason to show why you were out of work. And if during that time you can show that you were working on specific skill sets, maybe you were taking online courses, maybe you were, doing things to sharpen up and keep those skills sharp. You want to make sure that you can talk about those things. But there's no shame in trying to get back into the workforce. In fact, that's a lot of the work that we do through our agency is making sure that we can help people kind of transition back in. A lot of times, just be honest, be transparent. Most companies will understand.
Yeah. And I guess I'll take the question a step further because now I'm picturing like trying to spell that out on a resume. Would you put, like, for example, say there's a 3-year gap, would you like put it on the resume? Say you were working on something else, like you were going to school or whatever. Would you put that in that 3-year gap, like on your list of things that you've done?
I actually just had a conversation with someone last week about this who left her previous employer about a year and a half ago, and she focused on pursuing her education, right? She continued her education, went back to school. And I said, that's something to be proud of. You should be incredibly proud that you're completing this achievement. And I said, people are going to see that gap on your resume. They're going to have questions. Let's just get ahead of it. Like Juan said, be open and transparent ahead of this. And I asked her, put it on your resume. Kind of discuss the classes you're taking, discuss what you're doing to continue your education during this gap period, so to speak. And that way you're addressing those questions ahead of time. You're not having to risk it, right? Will someone call me or will they not call me? Because I'd rather they see that first and then make the decision than already discount you because of that.
Yeah. Karen is commenting from Facebook. And this is just some good advice, I feel like, but maybe you want to even elaborate on this. So Karen is saying you should always have a list of questions to ask about the company that you're interviewing with. And she also says, don't interrupt, but I feel like that kind of ties into what we were talking about with like research and maybe just showing interest by having that. Anything you want to add to that?
Yes,
Absolutely.
you want to
Go ahead, Juan.
Okay. So we always tell candidates to do homework on 3 topics. 1, do homework on the company and the organization you're interviewing with. Do homework on the actual job posting and description that you have so that you know it like the back of your hand and you can tie your examples to what they're looking for. And then 3, do homework on yourself and your resume. A lot of people don't take the time to go back through their work history and identify the things that they have done and accomplished. So we want to make sure that people know everything they've done so that in a moment of an interview, you can come back and pull out any examples that you have that may show why you're a good fit. Can't tell you how many times people get out of an interview either through video or driving home and they're like, oh man, I had the perfect example for why I'm a good fit for this company, but they think about it afterwards because during an interview you get nervous, you get clammy, all those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Connor, did you have anything you wanted to add?
And I would agree. Karen has a great point in her comment. Definitely have questions prepared, because if you put that in perspective, if you have no questions prepared for someone that's interviewing you, that can send the absolute wrong message. You're taking your time to interview, and they are as well, the hiring manager. And if they ask you, okay, what questions do you have for us? And you say, no, I'm good. I don't think I have any questions. That immediately tells that company and that manager that you're not interested enough to even ask them any questions about the job.
Yeah, definitely. It looks like Ashley Schrader from YouTube has just kind of elaborated a little bit more. And it sounds like she is pointing out a specific question maybe some people might hear in an interview, asking like, tell us a time when you were able to turn a situation around. And that actually just made me think there are probably some questions that people should be prepared to get in an interview, and maybe some of them might be surprises. So what sort of top questions do you think people need to prepare for an interview?
I think there are definitely some situational questions that arise. A lot of our clients like to use those questions because they're a good gauge of the person's culture fit and their personality and kind of how they would handle situations, of course. And there's always ways to think about it. There's a couple different methods we use. One of my favorite is called the MSA method. And, what did you make? What did you save? What did you achieve? There's also the STAR method. There's different ways to approach these things and different guidelines we can offer candidates, but it's always helpful to, before you go into an interview, have these situations in your head. Just think of a couple different examples of maybe a time when you had to handle a confrontation, maybe a time when you had to persuade someone to get on your side about something. Just always have those things ready. Like Juan said, when you're preparing for interviews, just have those things ready to go through when you need to.
Yeah, I feel like some of the questions that I hear nowadays are not necessarily like, now tell us a great thing about yourself, or like it is kind of like almost even like, how did you turn some problem around, or like how did you take something that was negative and make it positive? So I think that's something that maybe folks should be thinking about.
Yep.
Anil is asking, is there something like too much experience in the job market? I feel like I hear that. Like, I feel like I'm overqualified for this. I mean, too much experience? Is that a thing?
Yeah, so I actually really like that question, and I think that candidates kind of reject themselves out of jobs based on not thinking that they're going to get it even before they apply. And one of the things I tell candidates is don't self-reject. If you think that you're going to be happy at that organization in that job, and the pay is what you're thinking it should be, go ahead and apply for it. The biggest thing, again, going back to that original point, make sure that you are tailoring that resume to that job that you're applying. So if you're a big leader, but you want to take a step back because maybe you don't want to be in management anymore, make sure that you tailor that resume down so it doesn't show that company that's like, why are you applying for a job that's beneath you, if that makes sense.
On the flip side, Ashley is back with another question, which is a great question because I can't tell you how many stories we've done with people during this pandemic where they said, I've been doing this for so many years and I don't want to do this anymore. And I want to do something different. And I had this dream to be in this field or whatnot. Ashley wants to know, say, for example, her example here, you've been in customer service, you want to change roles. Maybe you don't have any background in what you want to do. Is there any way to kind of spin that or flip that so it's not like, I don't have background, but here I am?
Absolutely. And changing your career can be very intimidating. It can seem like a scary thing at first. My best advice here is keep an open mind. There is a lot right now. There's a lot in the job market. It's just a matter of keeping an open mind and being open to whatever kind of comes your way. I think there are several different avenues you can pursue, whether that's, hey, maybe I have to take a contract role just to get some additional experience in a different field, get that on my resume, get that experience. Or it's taking a contract to hire role with a great organization here in Charlotte that likes to kind of try that program out to see if this company is the right fit for you and vice versa. A lot of times those organizations will bring somebody on in a role that's contract to hire if they have no experience in a specific field and just kind of try them out and see if they love that company. And then they'll convert that person to a full-time role. Maybe it's the same role or a different role in a different industry. So there's always ways to approach it. Just keep an open mind and just don't pigeonhole yourself is my biggest advice.
Yep. And I would add to that too. Sometimes we talk about maybe it takes one step back to, take a running sprint forward. Sometimes you may take a job that maybe is quote unquote by title lower than what you have. But if you want to switch industries, sometimes it takes that for a year, maybe two, and then you're off and running in the direction that you intend to go.
Yeah. Yeah. All things to consider. You got to weigh it out, maybe the bigger picture or the longer run for what the move is going to mean for you. Shannon had a similar question, changing industries. So I think we tackled that. One thing that I did want to pick your brain about, is there something, and you both can answer this in turn, but is there like a top, I don't want to say complaint, but like top feedback that you get from the employer side of if this person only did this, or I don't know, is there like a top correction that you hear from employers for people who apply for their jobs?
I think for me, so I've had some feedback recently. So number one, if you are showing up to an interview, like we've talked about, make sure that you're presentable. I had feedback, about a candidate being essentially disqualified before they even got the chance to talk about their background. And then I think also some other feedback, and it's very specific to industry. If you're an engineer, know engineering. If you're in accounting, make sure that you know Excel and some, SAP, for example. It just really depends on what your specific field is, making sure that you've got the right skill sets for those jobs.
Okay. Connor, anything on your side?
One of the biggest feedback points I receive is culture-based or personality-based. And a lot of this can be pressure going into interviews, right? Like Juan said, a lot of us are interview nervous. It's a weird thing for us to be doing, is putting ourselves on a show basically and displaying for everyone else. And interviews can feel like you're being grilled, like you're being interrogated. A lot of times this is a chance for you to let your personality show, let all of this out and really show the interviewers who you are, how your experience relates to the job. So feedback that I've heard sometimes is, this candidate looks great on paper, but in reality, their experience didn't really come through in the interview. They weren't able to talk through their experience. They couldn't tell me examples of when they made this happen. And so just don't be afraid to, like Juan said, do your research, know yourself, know the company, know the role, and have that confidence. The more you practice these things, the more that confidence is going to come out, and you'll really put your best foot forward in interviews.
Okay. I did want to, I'm just making sure that we're not missing any comments here. I want to work in a company. Okay. let's revisit resumes, because I know we touched on it a bit. We might have some new people joining us who didn't get their questions. And so once again, folks who are just hopping on here, ask questions of our experts. I mean, they can be resume related. I know that's kind of the headline that we put here on this post, but we've also been talking about interviews. I'm sure anything job related is fair game here. Yeah, so Ashley commenting again, saying being a college graduate a few years back, looking for something that I don't have a degree in. I mean, I feel like that's the thing right now. I mean, people are rethinking, they're rethinking life. They're rethinking, how they want to be spending a good portion of their weekday doing. So, yeah, all I can say is best of luck to you in whatever you're looking for. And yeah, this is the story that we're hearing from so many people. But yeah, I wanted to revisit the resume situation. I feel like, at least when I was like first applying to jobs in news, there was like, you had to have like the cover letter and then your resume, and in news it's like you got to highlight certain things. Is it safe to say that, like, depending on different industries, you might be stacking your resume differently, and or maybe like education might be at the top for some, and maybe for others education's at the bottom? And like, I guess, how do you kind of explain that to folks who come to advice about that?
So I think with resumes, again, it goes back to tailoring it, right? So if it's a position that is highly skilled that requires a very specific degree, of course, put it at the top of the resume. If it's something where your degree maybe doesn't tie into what the job actually entails, what your professional experience does, put that at the top and move your education to the bottom. I think the other thing too is making sure that really the main point is skill sets have to show on the resume. At the end of the day, that's the biggest thing.
Got it. So putting your best stuff up near the top, is it safe to say that?
Correct.
Okay. And I'm also going to guess you probably, and I know you touched on it, but you want to kind of keep it, as, I don't want to say brief, but as concise as possible. You don't have to put everything on there, right?
Right, absolutely not. And especially if you're someone who's been working for quite some time. I mean, I've even talked to candidates who have taken several years experience off their resume and said more experience if required, to see, like, you can always put that on there and expand later. What I would rather do is keep it short, succinct, get what you need to get on there, and then have that conversation down the road if they want to discuss that. Because I know a lot of people are very, very concerned about being disqualified based on years of experience. And so just nip that in the bud. Don't even include it if you're worried about it. Just focus on the relevant experience. Like you said, put the best stuff at the top, and then the rest will come.
I love the question from Ashley about having a cover letter.
Yeah.
So I would say, have a cover letter if it's something that, one, if the ATS system that you're applying through asks for a cover letter spot, please include one. If you have one, go ahead and attach it to the resume. But the biggest thing here is it doesn't have to be a novel. It can be just, 3 short paragraphs. 1, touching on, why you want the job. 2, why you're qualified for the job. And then 3, why you're excited about the opportunity and what the next steps are. Again, doesn't have to be a long written, 3-page thing, just a short, maybe 45, couple little things there. One thing too that I would always say too about the cover letters is people always forget to change the companies that are listed in their cover letter or their resume. It's really, really easy when you're applying through Indeed and LinkedIn to just click apply, but you forget to change what company you're applying to.
That makes me do the cringe face.
Yeah.
I can totally get how that would happen. I mean, not in a judging way, just more like, ooh, I can pictured like doing that.
Right.
Okay, so we addressed the cover letter. Are we still doing to who it may concern, dear sir / madam? Are we like trying to be like specific, like we know like who we're writing to?
I think that depends. If you know who you're writing to, definitely address them. I will say, I've seen comments on both sides of the fence. I personally am very anti-cover letter. I think, especially in this day and age, I think they are a waste of time. I will say that working with a recruiter is a benefit, because one of my coworkers says this every day, and I think it's funny, but I'm running with it. He says that we are your cover letter as a recruiter. We're representing you. We're letting this client know who you are, what you've done, why you want the job. So you don't have to send that cover letter. It's unnecessary. So I think that's always interesting.
Yeah, and that's a good point there. This is kind of a different tangent here, but Karen is asking again another question. Are new hires having difficulty transitioning to virtual training versus brick and mortar training? I don't know if you have, are you able to provide insight on that? I don't know if that's in your wheelhouse.
I think it depends on the person. I know a lot of our clients have had to adjust, right? As of 2020, they had to make everything virtual. A lot of candidates had been onboarded and fully hired remotely, and they had never met their coworkers. As we're transitioning more into back in office and, like Karen said, brick and mortar, people are seeing a little bit of a shift where orientations can be in person. A lot of this is still remote, though. So depends on kind of your adaptability and your capability with technology and how familiar you are with that, and if you're comfortable doing those online programs. But a lot of companies have this set up and they've been doing it for several years. And I'd say they're pros by now. So they make it really easy to get into that system.
Yeah. Earlier, y'all had mentioned how you can also assist with, like salary negotiation type stuff. And that just makes me wonder. And I don't know if it's changed at all. I mean, is it okay to talk money in that initial interview? Like I guess, have the boundaries changed in the past couple of years?
I think it's important to be prepared if it does come up, but don't be the one to bring it up, especially in a first interview. It's not appropriate to start asking about money. It kind of shows that you're going in for the wrong reasons. Employers want to know that you're there for them and for the actual position, not for the dollar signs.
Yeah. Okay. So things have not changed. I just wanted to make sure because, we are dealing, I feel like, with an evolving marketplace, if you will, where, people are looking for different things. And in some ways, they're putting their foot down more for the things that they want from their employer. Ashley's asking again a question that I'm sure y'all would love to answer because she missed the beginning. Ashley, they work for Talent Bridge. Do you guys want to talk about Talent Bridge and what you do, just for the folks who are just hopping on now?
Ooh,
Connor,
would love
let you
to.
take it.
Yeah, you can see my eyes light up. So Talent Bridge has been in Charlotte since 2002. We essentially are a staffing partner. We connect people with their purpose in life and have meaningful conversations in the area. So our job is to act as a partner to folks that are looking for new jobs or folks that are looking to hire talent for their team. And we really are a resource on both sides of the house. So whether you know somebody who wants to make a change in their career, whether you want to make a change yourself, whether you know somebody who maybe needs to add someone to their team in the next couple of weeks, we are here to help you. So we can be a resource for you in all ways through interview preparation, interview debriefs, salary negotiation, resume feedback and tips. We are here as a resource for you.
All right. So there you go, Ashley. Now you are in the know. I feel like we're starting to wind down with some of the comments that we're getting. I figured I'll just throw this out there for just like a nice, well-rounded discussion. We talked about a lot about perhaps what employers are looking from their applicants. I mean, what are you hearing on the other side? The employers who are like, I'm trying to get someone to come and they're not coming. Like, what are you hearing from the candidates who are passing on these companies?
So that's a great question. I think one of the biggest things that we see, candidates really want to feel included and be a part of something that is growing to something bigger. And a lot of times employers don't relay that message properly to the candidates, maybe through an interview or through the whole process. We always, tell clients, be excited about bringing someone on and show them why they want to be there. Obviously you can't necessarily hide a bad culture per se, or you can't hide, flaws in the organization. But if there are bad reviews about your organization, talk about them, bring them up, face them head first so that candidate feels like they can trust what you're saying and what the job they're going into is.
Anything on your side, Connor?
I agree 100%. I think that's probably the main focus. And I think, as with all things, address it with transparency and get ahead of that when you can. Don't let that come around and bite you in the butt later. Just talk about it right now, nip it in the bud, address those concerns, and talk about what you're doing to change that, to change the culture, and be forward thinking and talk about that progressive nature.
All right. Matthew is on here talking about hybrid workspaces. Speaking of things that I guess employees nowadays might be looking for something hybrid. Are businesses looking at, he's calling it hot desking, sharing desks among different people and different shifts? Is that a good middle ground for employers and employees? Is that something you've heard talked about?
Personally, I, in my industry, have not seen that come up yet. What I have seen is kind of the shift to a hybrid schedule, whether it's, come into the office 3 days a week and work from home twice a week. We're seeing a good bit of that now as employers recognize that they have to adjust to keep their talent and retain talent and attract talent in this marketplace where a lot of companies are moving fully remote and they have been for a while, that's a big attractive piece for some candidates. There are still some folks that want to work in office 5 days a week, which is totally fine, but I just think that's not the way that things are progressing, and so people have to be competitive to get that talent.
Yeah. Ashley wanted to know, speaking of Talent Bridge, do you guys usually work with mostly like remote jobs or hands-on jobs? Any industry?
So that's an excellent question. We actually work primarily here in the Charlotte market. We have other markets as well. We just opened up a Denver office, for example, but we're very much a local recruiting firm. And then we also have a national arm. So it really depends on what you're going after. For us here locally in Charlotte, so Connor and I are on our local recruiting team. We have human resources and recruiting. We have accounting and finance, which is what I support, engineering, construction, professional support services, and IT. Did I miss any, Connor? I think I got them all. Yeah.
All right. So there you go, Ashley, and you're very welcome. And thank you. Thank you for asking so many questions, great questions that are going to give some wonderful insight to folks who are also tuning in. So yeah, I think we are kind of getting to a winding down point. Do y'all want to leave us with any parting tips here? Any parting comments? We can go one at a time or however you want to do it.
I think looking for a new job and changing careers can be very scary. Don't let that intimidate you. I think finding a partner, number one, is going to be helpful, whether it's us as recruiters, another recruiting firm, have someone that you can bounce ideas off of, have a couple. It always helps to have different eyes on things, situations that can give you advice and kind of consult you in different ways. And just be open with people you're talking to. Be transparent, talk about what you want, what you don't want. Those are equally important factors, and just be open-minded to whatever comes your way.
All right. Juan,
That's excellent advice from Connor. One thing I will add, a lot of people have misconceptions about staffing firms. Particularly with Talent Bridge, for example, we don't charge our candidates anything for coming to us. Same thing with clients. We of course have a fee, but it doesn't actually get charged until we find you the right person. And so that's something that's really, really important. Don't give yourself all of the resources that you can, especially if there's someone out there that's willing to help and kind of assist you in that career search. Apply and have a conversation. That it never hurts to talk to people.
All right. Ashley is just the question queen. Do you have like a link to Talent Bridge that you can offer to us? Is it like an easy, can we remember it easy?
Talentbridge.com.
There you go. Talentbridge.com. Well, we've got some interest for you. So that is great to hear. I think that's going to do it for us. I'm not seeing really any other questions coming in. So thank you, Juan, and thank you, Connor from Talent Bridge for joining us for this very robust, coming from, okay. Sorry, Ashley is just, I like it. Engagement. She's very engaged. Thank you all for coming on here and having this robust conversation about resumes and job hunting and all that. And thanks to everyone who joined in for the stream. We had some great questions and I enjoyed it a lot. Did y'all enjoy?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's great.
Fabulous. All right. Thanks, everyone. I'm Vanessa Rufus, by the way, with WCNC Charlotte. We are going to sign off the stream for now. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Vanessa.
So just to recap, we're going to do a severe weather spotter training course as well as talk about severe weather tonight. The National Weather Service, Clay from the GSP office, is actually on the stream as well. He's listening in. He's kind of going to be my check person to make sure I cover everything because you're not only helping me, you're going to be helping the National Weather Service. So if you're not familiar with what the National Weather Service does, our local office actually isn't very local. It's down in Greer, South Carolina. Greer, South Carolina office covers Mecklenburg County, but the Columbia office actually covers Lancaster County, Chesterfield County, and to the southeast. Our eastern counties are covered by the Raleigh office, and a couple of my counties that are up in the mountains are actually covered by Blacksburg. So we have 4 separate offices, and not one of them is actually located in the TV market that I'm in right here in Charlotte. So it makes it kind of, I would say difficult, but it makes it interesting because we have to communicate with a lot of offices outside the area, but they monitor a lot of what we do here in Charlotte. And just to show you, if you're looking at the graphics across the country, these weather service offices are the ones that are primarily going to be issuing your warnings. So the warnings, I know a lot of folks think I'm responsible for that. I can't take that responsibility. That would be I wouldn't take the blame or the praise for that, but it actually comes from the National Weather Service. And the reason that is important, it's a government agency. They're the ones that are able to trigger all the EAS, the alerts, sirens, anything like that. So when your phone goes off, those wireless emergency alerts, it's because they issued it and it was able to go out. And just to kind of recap, that's the coverage area for the Greenville-Spartanburg area. Here's a look at our TV market. So if you're not familiar with the TV business, the Charlotte TV market covers 22 counties. So if you've ever wondered or yelled at me for breaking into programming, it's because one of these counties had a tornado warning. And it's kind of our responsibility to cover these counties. And we'll get yelled at a lot because we're covering a county that might be an hour and a half, 2-hour drive away. And a lot of folks will say, Brad, why are you cutting in? Nothing's happening in Charlotte. Well, I'm the TV station for Statesville, for Boone, for Hickory, for Rockingham, for Rock Hill, for all those cities. They rely on us for severe weather information. So as much as people in Charlotte might be upset I'm cutting in, they're glad. And vice versa, think about it. There's a tornado warning in Charlotte. They're probably wondering, why are you breaking into my programming? Because nothing's happening here. But this is broken up between the 4 forecast offices. You can see I kind of color-coded them there. I'll zoom in. And the biggest problem here, and I know Clay is listening, he can probably relate to this, is that little panhandle of Lancaster County, which shoots up 521. Believe it or not, we've had warnings for York County, no warning for Lancaster County, and then a warning for Union County, because those are actually 2 separate offices responsible. So they're working hard to coordinate these warnings. But a lot of times, if you watch my coverage, you might hear me say, just treat this like a warning. That's why I say that, because a lot of times, obviously, tornadoes don't stop at the county line. They'll go wherever they want. Some of the tools we use for severe weather, believe it or not, I think people are always mystified by this. We still launch weather balloons twice a day, and they're not all from China. They're actually here, okay? We actually launch 2 times a day. The closest sounding location is in Greensboro, and the next closest is down in Atlanta. So what these weather balloons do is twice a day, we call it 0Z and 12Z. If you're familiar with Zulu time or UTC time, that's in the morning and in the evening. For us, Eastern time right now, that's approximately 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. Okay, and so on this balloon is a little package. It's like a weather station and a shoebox. It's called a radiosonde. It measures the air temperature, dew point pressure, and wind speed and direction from the ground up until that balloon pops. And as we got to see with the Chinese spy balloon, these balloons go up to the stratosphere. They will make it all the way up to 90, maybe 100,000 feet before they pop. They're made of latex, so what happens is, as you go up, the pressure decreases, right? So the balloon will get bigger and bigger and bigger until it explodes. It also gets a little flatter as it gets bigger, which makes it look like what? A UFO. So over time, these things get higher up there. Eventually they'll explode. And they can be in the air for like 2.5, 3 hours. And they'll get carried long way in the jet stream. Sometimes they'll end up out in the Atlantic from here and go even farther. What's interesting is the radiosonde, which is the instrument pack, actually has a self-addressed stamped postage on the outside of it. And if you find one of these, because it eventually will fall back to Earth with a parachute, you throw it in a mailbox, it gets mailed back to the National Weather Service, and they recycle it. It actually says not a bomb on it as well, because a lot of people see this and they see government writing and they think it's something bad. But I can't remember. Clay could probably tell me. I wish he could hear me. Yeah, like how many did they get returned? He might know. I think it's like maybe 25 or 30%. I have to turn my audio up here. I'm gonna move this a little farther away. There we go. All right, Clay, I don't know if you can hear me, but how many of the radiosondes do you guys get returned? Do you know offhand, the Weather Service?
Yeah, so actually it's a really low number. We were under the impression it was kind of like 10% get returned from this. We were under the impression it was kind of like 10%
So it's about, he says it's about 10%, so it's even lower than I thought. And my guess would be that because a lot of them end up in areas where there's nobody to find them. Because you think about it, especially in North Carolina, they're probably ending out over the Atlantic.
So those are really important. Obviously, you know about Doppler radar. We'll talk more about that in a minute. Satellite data has become really, really important. Our satellite data has become, to me, that's one of the biggest advancements in my 25 years of doing that, is that satellite data now can come in at 30 seconds to 1 minute intervals. So sometimes the satellite data comes in more frequently than the radar data, because the satellite's a geostationary satellite continuously anchored over the US. It can take a picture every 30 seconds to a minute, and it's high res capability. And the resolution is now down to tens of meters. So you can see a cumulus cloud, a thunderstorm developing on a satellite image before the rain actually shows up on the radar. Pretty impressive. This morning, how many of you guys saw the Starship blow up down in Texas? Okay, SpaceX launched the Starship this morning and tested it. It blew up. First thing I did, I went to the GOES satellite data, and sure enough, I could see the plume and I could see the explosion on the satellite data. That's how good the satellite did. In fact, the satellite data thought it was a lightning strike because the flash to the satellite looks like a flash of lightning. So it shows up. We sometimes see meteors that way as well. We use a lot of weather models. Weather models, I think everyone's heard of weather models, and people are like, what is a weather model? It's basically a giant math problem. It's a numerical model. These are simulations of the atmosphere into the future. They're not forecasts. I think that's the biggest misnomer. I think if you think it's a forecast, it's not. It's a tool. We call them guidance for a reason. They help us build a forecast. To me, it's like going to Lowe's or Home Depot. Just because you have a bunch of tools doesn't mean you can build a house. Okay, you still got to put the thing together. There's lumber, there's nails, there's stuff. That's the stuff we use to put the forecast together. So these are tools. You just don't go there and pick out a house at Lowe's. You got to put the thing together. And so that's what we do. One of the great things about the Weather Service is, and you may have heard me refer to this on air as we're doing storm coverage, is we're in constant communication with emergency managers, the National Weather Service, even other meteorologists in the Charlotte TV market. We have a private chat, and we're chatting with them all the time, and we're sharing information about where storms are, where they could be going, if there's going to be a warning. If not, like, hey, I'll tell Clay and the guys down at GSP and Trish, like, hey, I see this storm on radar. It looks like it's rotating. Are you guys thinking about warning on it? And we'll have that kind of communication a lot through that. Doppler radar. Everybody's got Doppler radar on their phone. It looks cool. Not everybody knows how it works. I love Doppler radar, but I think the biggest thing that people misunderstand about it is it's got huge drawbacks. Doppler radar is essentially a tool like a cell phone tower. They are sporadically placed around the country. They don't have uniform coverage. So just like a cell phone tower, if you're not really close to it, your signal isn't really good. The farther you get away from the radar, the worse the data is. And that's why spotters become really important. So one of the things about Doppler radar is it shoots a pencil width beam of energy out, and it goes out in a straight line from the radar. But obviously the Earth is not flat. Breaking news in case you guys thought it was. It is a sphere. So because it's a sphere, the beam starts going higher and higher in the sky because it goes out in a straight line. The Earth actually curves away from it. So by the time the radar beam from Greer gets up here, depending on what part of town you are, it could be between 5,000 and 10,000 feet above our heads. Okay, that's great. That's way up there. I guess where all the severe weather happens down here near the ground. So like things like tornadoes, downbursts, even hail size, you need to see closer to the ground. So spotters become really, really important. And that's why I really rely on spotters, because I can see the rotation at 10,000 feet, but I don't know if that's creating a tornado down at the surface. So somebody reporting or sending me a picture or sending me video is really, really valuable, especially if you know what you're looking at. The thing about Doppler radar that makes it so cool to me is it doesn't just tell us where things are, it tells us which direction they're going. So the Doppler effect is what Doppler radar uses. And you probably are familiar with the Doppler effect and you don't even know it. If you've been at a train crossing or you've been at a light and a fire truck comes by, the frequency of the sound coming towards you is different as it goes away. So imagine being at the train tracks and the train is coming in, it goes, it makes that change in sound and frequency. Well, we use that in the Doppler radar. When raindrops or targets are coming towards the radar, they have a different frequency than they go away. So not only can we tell where raindrops are on the map, we can tell if it's coming towards or away from the radar. And why is that important? Well, if raindrops going towards the radar and away are really close together, guess what's happening in between? You have rotation, you have things moving. So it's really important to know where that stuff is. Now, the Doppler radar doesn't just scan at one level. It goes through what's called a volume scan. It rotates around, tilts up, rotates around again, tilts up, rotates around, and it can do several slices of the atmosphere. And if you put them all together, you can get a 3D image of what a storm looks like. And if you're watching on the stream, you can see this is a 3D image of the velocity data of the Pilger tornadoes in Nebraska. It was like 6 years ago. 2 tornadoes next to each other. That's what it looks like. We can see things like hail cores. It's pretty cool. Having chased storms, looking at these 3D images, kind of what the structure of a storm looks like. So here's a look at what the radar sees. You can see the radar scans different levels, as I mentioned, but below, it doesn't really see really well, and that's where the spotter becomes really important. So what we're looking for, what we want people to give us information is what is happening at the cloud base and below. This is a really, really important part. The farther away you get from the radar, we get even less and less data, as I mentioned. So in Charlotte, it's really helpful to have spotters, but I tell you what, spotters up in Statesville, Salisbury area, it's even more important because the radar beam there can be 12, 13,000 feet above the ground. So the spotters actually have a program called Skywarn. They're the ones that help, kind of give ground truth to what's happening. And in some cases actually can lead to warnings being issued. If we know there are trained spotters in the area and they spot a wall cloud or a possible tornado, if we know these are trained spotters, the National Weather Service will issue a warning. They will count that as like an observed tornado. So that's how vital it is. You know, it's a trained professional, basically not professional, not getting paid, unfortunately, but you're trained amateurs, I guess, in this case, that would help issue a warning. A lot of trained spotters also include first responders. So think of most law enforcement, firefighters, medics, they're all trained on this as well. They would count those as Skywarn trained as well. So what is a severe thunderstorm warning? Okay. So severe thunderstorm warning. What was one to get issued for? Well, believe it or not, it's not because of dark clouds and loud thunder and lightning. A lot of times I think we think just because a storm has a ton of lightning and really loud or scary looking, it's severe. Sometimes I think it's a bad storm, but what makes it severe is actually specific criteria. 58-mile-per-hour winds or higher. Okay, that's usually the threshold to break a branch or cause damage. 1-inch diameter hail. 1-inch diameter is the hail that's just below golf ball size, very close to that. That's the kind that will cause damage to your roof and your car, even if you can't see it. If you ever get golf ball size hail at your house, get your roof checked out as soon as possible, because you may not notice damage, but the next time it rains, you will find out pretty quickly. And then obviously tornado. But there's other hazards like lightning and flooding. Flooding does have a warning system, obviously flash flood warnings, but lightning, as dangerous as lightning is, there's no criteria for a warning for the amounts of lightning. I wish there was, but there really isn't. So, one storm that has more lightning than the other is definitely, I think, in my opinion, a more violent storm, because that means a lot of updraft is going on. We've got a lot of things going on, but there's no criteria for lightning that would trigger a warning, even though we want you to take all lightning very seriously. So the risk levels, you probably have seen these in other locations. The Storm Prediction Center puts these out way ahead of time. We call these severe weather outlooks. They go from 1 to 5. I'll be honest with you, and I know Clay's listening, so he'll understand. We know the public doesn't really understand very well. We have colors and names that people don't associate with bad weather. Things like marginal, slight, enhanced, moderate. People don't always relate to bad weather. So what we have done, and this is what we do as broadcasters and to help communicate it better, is we've kind of grouped them into more simplistic terms and more simplistic colors. We use low, medium, high, and extreme. Pretty straightforward. Yellow, orange, red, and then kind of a pink color. And that's kind of the thresholds we use. And again, this is just a heads up. Think of a severe weather outlook as a heads up, days and days ahead of time. So oftentimes you'll see me use this graphic on air, the 5-day severe weather outlook. I'll say maybe Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday on there. You know, we'll say one of those days there's a potential, a low, medium, or high risk for severe weather. This is kind of the beginning, like, hey, heads up, this is not going to be a normal day. There's not just going to be regular thunderstorms. And this is what it looks like. If you go to the storm prediction site, the center site, they actually go out to 8 days. So believe it or not, we get 8 days into the future. We kind of have a general idea where there could be severe weather. And the way this works, think of it as a forecast funnel. 8 days out, the area is really broad. We think somewhere in the Carolinas there's going to be severe weather. 3 to 4 days out, we might narrow it down to the Western Carolinas. And then the day of, there might be a watch issued for just some of the counties in there. And then if there's a warning, it's down to the county level. So it starts broad in the time scale and a geographic standpoint and gets closer and closer to, you know, a town or a home. But the thing to remember too is you can get severe weather in any risk level. Some of the worst tornado days here have been in what is considered low to medium risk days. It's, you know, we'd love to say every high risk day produces a ton of severe weather, but some of the low end days produce it as well. That's why any risk level, you got to take it seriously. Watch first warning. How many people know what a watch and a warning are? All right, most of you do, but this is still the most confusing thing that we talk about. I have people I work with that get it confused, you know, and sometimes I'll see a horrible headline, or we'll put a super up and it'll say tornado warning from 1 to 5 p.m. And I'm like, what? How is there a 4-hour tornado warning? It was meant to be a tornado watch. A watch is up for hours. It's the ingredients are there. The warning is a more immediate, like in the next 20 to 30 minutes. So I want to go forward here. Oh, I left it out. So you might have seen my cupcake analogy, right? So I like to use the cupcake analogy. The watch is like having all the ingredients for the cupcakes on the counter. The warning is the cupcakes made. Okay. So when a watch is issued, that means the ingredients for that thing is on the table. Once we get a warning, that means it's put together. So a flood watch means conditions are favorable for flooding. Tornado watch means conditions are favorable for tornadoes. A winter storm watch means conditions are favorable for winter weather. Once the warning is issued, that means, guess what? The ingredients came together, it got baked, and it's sitting on the table. It's there. So the warning is the more immediate threat. There are several types of warnings now. We have base warnings, considerable warnings, and destructive warnings. So severe thunderstorms even have different criteria. And the considerable means 70-mile-per-hour winds or higher. So this means it's not just a regular severe thunderstorm. This is going to be pretty dangerous. And if we get a destructive tag on there, which is 80-mile-per-hour winds or baseball-sized hail, this will actually set your phone off. You'll get one of those wireless emergency alerts. And if you're not familiar with these wireless emergency alerts, it's not an app on your phone. It's built into your phone, and it comes from the cell phone carrier. It's like the EAS on our TV station. It comes across whether you want it or not. Now, you can turn them on and off in operating system, iOS and in Android. I would recommend not doing that because these are the most severe of severe. We don't push these out for regular severe thunderstorm warnings, even considerable. They have to be destructive. They have to be flash flood warnings or a tornado warning. And the way they work, I wish they were totally GPS based. They're really not. They're based on the cell phone tower you're hitting. So I see 2 cell phone towers over here. Imagine, we're pretty close, but imagine that cell phone tower is in a tornado warning, but for some reason over here at lower left, we weren't. We would get the tornado warning because the cell phone tower we're hitting is inside the tornado warning. So it's based off the cell phone tower that your phone is receiving from. So there tends to be a little bit of overwarning, but not as much as there would be if we just issued the whole county. This is a really loud alert, and I'm not going to mimic on here because we can't, but we've had them go off in the station before while we've been on TV, and it is super loud. There's also amber alerts on there as well, and those will go off quite a bit. Got to be careful of those because those are issued on the statewide level. And I'll be honest with you, I want to find every kid, but sometimes you get an amber alert for somewhere that's not anywhere near you. And for a lot of reasons, that's how people end up turning all their alerts off because the amber alerts set them off all the time. And so you can distinguish, you can turn just amber alerts off and leave the weather alerts on. So there is the option, at least in iOS. I know. I'm not sure about Android. I haven't looked. I know, James, you know. Do you have the option in Android too? I know in iOS you do. So that being said, I think everybody should have 3 ways to get warning. Okay. Severe weather warnings you should have 3 sources. Wireless emergency alerts built into your phone, weather apps like ours, WCNC, but there are a bevy of other apps that will warn you. Watching TV or monitoring TV or live stream. I'll be honest with you, and James can attest to this because he's my streaming guy. We get more people that watch the stream. And the reason is we can send a notification to your phone and you're more likely to click that link and watch the live stream immediately and not go over to the TV and turn it on. Social media is great. As we know, Twitter is kind of getting wonky now for warnings. There's limits on the API now, so I would not rely on Twitter as much as I would in the past, but it is a source. You can turn notifications on for certain warnings. Same thing with Facebook, Instagram. There's some other sources that aren't bad. Social media tends to be better for the heads up days ahead of time than the actual warning. Other things, NOAA weather radio. Does anyone here have a NOAA weather radio? Yeah. NOAA weather radios are great. They're the phone's kind of making them obsolete, but they are great for especially areas where you don't have cell phone coverage because you can usually get radio coverage. The other thing, this is surprising, we find in research, people calling, texting family and friends actually works. And believe it or not, they're more likely to believe their family and friends tell them there's a tornado warning than me. That's just human nature. And so I will say this on the air all the time. You guys, I know you watch a lot of your avid viewers of mine. You may have friends, family, colleagues that don't watch me, but if I can warn you and then you can warn them, then the process is working. So if you know, like, hey, my buddy lives in Gastonia or somebody I go to church with lives in Statesville and there's a tornado warning, I can easily pick up my phone and text them or call them and say, hey, do you know there's a tornado warning right now for where you are? They may not, and it might be your text or call that actually gives them a heads up. So don't ever hesitate to do that. That is a valuable tool. What you do is amplify our message. It goes out to a few people. You tell your friends, they tell their friends, and it just spreads the message much quicker. So this is the graphic I was looking for earlier. This is my cupcake watch and cupcake warning. I'll leave that up for a second because I made this like 7 years ago just on a whim. I think I was running and I thought of this. And I had so many emergency managers reach out to me and say, hey, can we use your graphic? I'm like, sure, whatever makes people understand. And so many people saw it and got it right away. So if this helps at all, the watch and warning thing is really is difficult. So tornadoes, we're in that season right now. Tornado average by month for the U.S., April, May, and June are the 3 biggest months. May is by far the biggest month. Let's talk about North Carolina, though. The average tornado by month, March, April, May, and then September. Does anyone know why September would be a big month in the Carolinas for tornadoes? Exactly. Landfalling tropical storms and hurricanes. So we have a secondary season in the fall. And we also get pretty strong cold fronts that time of year. But for us, we're kind of in the heart of tornado time, April and May. Biggest tornado outbreaks I've seen here have been in April, May, and then October, September. Hurricane Fred, Francis, some of these landfalling hurricanes that come up from the Florida Panhandle tend to be big tornado producers for us. But we do get tornadoes here. How many people ever told you that we don't get tornadoes here? Yeah. I don't know. Is it like a real estate agent thing that like to get to sell a house? Or because I newcomers all the time will say, oh, I heard we didn't get tornadoes here. And I'm like, who told you that? And just to show you, and it's not that I try to scare people. I'm like, they think somehow that they don't happen here. They do happen quite a bit. So you may have heard recently, where is Tornado Alley? Tornado Alley, is it in the middle of the country or the southeast? Well, Tornado Alley, there's really not one. There's lots of them. And if anything, the tornado pattern is shifting east with time. And unfortunately, it's shifting in our direction. So I wanted to show North Carolina tornadoes. I love this website. If you're really into tornadoes, if you're really geeked out like me, this tornado archive site is amazing. It shows every tornado that they can document since 1680. And you're like, how do they know tornadoes from 1680? They went back and they looked at like stories, writings, newspaper articles of people talking about twisters or cyclones. and they try to document tornadoes that occurred in the past, and then all the ones that have been documented by the Weather Service. But look at North Carolina and South Carolina. We have a ton of tornadoes, and I want to zoom in on Mecklenburg County. I'm going to leave this graphic up because it'll take a second to load on your phone. But look at all of those tornadoes in the metro. Did you guys know there was an EF4 that went through Western Union County in the early 90s? I looked at that tornado track quite a bit. Back in the early 90s, Western Union County was just farm. If that same tornado occurred today, it would be taking out $250,000 homes, shopping centers, and several schools. Our area is growing rapidly. The tornadoes that occurred in the past, which we have documentation of, if they occurred today, there's millions and millions of dollars of property and now people living in areas where there would be nothing 20, 30 years ago. So as our urban sprawl continues to move out, we become bigger targets for these tornadoes. It's not that tornadoes don't hit cities. You hear that quite a bit from people. It's just that cities are small points on a map. They're hard to hit. But as they get bigger, they become easier. So there's a tornado that went not too far from here back in, the early 2000s. Actually came through the airport, hit Johnson C. Smith, and then went into Dilworth and just north of here in South End. So there's the reason I say this is there's a history of tornadoes occurring here. It's just sometimes you go through lulls in the activity and people don't remember them and they think they don't happen anymore. So severe thunderstorms, let's talk a little bit about them. How do they form? The biggest thing to think about severe weather, we need lift and you need instability or thunderstorm fuel. Thunderstorm fuel is just warm, moist air near the surface. The lift is a cold front, low pressure, heating of the day, something like that lifts the storm. There's thunderstorm stages. Hopefully we get this to work. But if you can see this image on your phone, this is a really important image. I think the one thing I could tell people about thunderstorms is they're not static things. Like a lot of times in the summer, I'll get countless messages about why do storms always go around my house? I get this all the time. And everyone thinks that they live in a bubble, like the storms never come. And the thing is, I would say maybe that's true, but I get that same question from literally every single location in our area. So it's got to storm somewhere. But the reason I often say that when a storm is mature, when it's going crazy, that's in its mature stage. So when you hear or see a storm in the distance and think, oh, it's coming this way, guess what? It's already fallen apart before it's moving your direction. So storms have to be at their mature stage over your house. They're either growing, they're mature, or they're weakening. They're not static. So what happens over time is people will hear, especially in the summer, or see the lightning off in the distance, or they'll pull out their phone and see it on the radar, and then it'll never come to their house, and I think it missed it. But the problem was when they were looking at it, it was in the mature state. And when it was coming, it dissipated. What's more likely is that storm will collapse, push out outflow, and a new storm will pop up over you. This is a cool little graphic I'll play about how these thunderstorms work. So oftentimes in the summer in particular, we'll wake up, it'll be a day like this. It'll be beautifully sunny in the morning, and people will wonder, why is there a chance for severe weather? It's because above our heads, we've got wind shear, we've got warm, humid air. We just haven't lifted the air to get up there yet. So what happens in the heating of the day, about 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, those storms start to bubble up and we start tapping into those ingredients above our head. Certain types of storms, we can even really see that. There's something there at least. There's a couple different types of storms. We have single cell and multi-cell storms. A lot of times around here, we get what's called multi-cell. We get a bunch of little storms that all kind of form together. Single cells are pretty straightforward. It's a single storm. But one of the biggest things we see around here from damage isn't really from tornadoes. It's from downbursts. So downbursts happen quite a bit. Downbursts in the summertime in particular, we lift that warm, humid air up to a part of the atmosphere where the temperature could be 30, 40 below zero. That air gets cold and it becomes dense. And so it wants to come crashing back to the ground. And so what happens is it comes down at a wind speed of 70, 80, 100 miles an hour, hits the ground and spreads out in all directions. These downbursts or wet microbursts cause 90% of our wind damage. So every time I see damage and people say it's a tornado, 9 times out of 10, it's not. It's straight line wind damage. And the thing to remember, straight line wind damage, we have a saying, wind is wind. Wind is going to break things. It doesn't matter if it's rotating or straight, okay? If your house, your structure, this tree can only withstand a 70-mile-an-hour wind, it doesn't care if it's a rotating wind or a straight line wind. It just cares it's 70 miles an hour. And trust me, airline pilots don't care either. These downbursts, before the advent of Doppler radar, believe it or not, planes used to crash all the time trying to land in thunderstorms because the thunderstorm would push the plane down into the ground as it was trying to land or take off. And so if you ever wonder why there's so many delays in the summer because of thunderstorms, it's probably the worst time to travel, because what happens is when these storms are anywhere near the airport, there's not a plane taking off or landing. And the other thing is when there's thunderstorms near the airport, if there's lightning, think about all the ground crews. Are you going to be out filling a plane up with fuel when there's thunder and lightning on the tarmac? Probably not. So what do they got to do? All the baggage carriers and the fuelers, they all have to seek shelter until the lightning's gone. So that will also shut the airport down. So if you ever get frustrated with thunderstorms in the summer and travel, it's because we've kind of learned our lesson in the past. They do not mess with thunderstorms. So downburst, I think this video works. I'll play it. You'll probably hear some audio on your end. There's a cool animation I'm going to play here of a downburst. It shows a thunderstorm development. And from a spotter standpoint, downbursts are really cool because when they come down to the ground, you can actually see them hit the ground and you'll see things curl up on either end. It looks like a bell. And when you see that curling, you know the wind is actually pulling out. So there's a picture up there on your phone, you'll see it as well, of that downburst happening. It looks like a waterfall. The rain just crashes to the ground and causes the wind to push out in all directions. We kind of like jokingly call these splats because on the radar, it looks like someone just took a bunch of wind and threw it straight down on a flat surface. And it just splats and it goes all over. And the direction on there's a great picture right here, this animation here. It actually just looks like the air crashing to the ground. And you'll see these little curly cues on the end. It's a really good example of a downburst. The other type of storms we get here quite a bit are squall lines. This is what we like to call the straight line storms. It looks like a long line of storms. This is more typical of what people see on the radar and they go, uh-oh, something's coming. Because this is the kind of thing that will go on for a long time. You'll see these over in Tennessee or coming out of the mountains. You can track these hours into the future. These are basically clusters of storms that form on cold fronts or outflows, and they go for hours, but they produce a lot of strong winds. The squall line structure is basically, there's still that mature stage going on. What's happening when storms are maintaining themselves, new storms are forming on the front as old ones die in the back, and they're going through a cycle where new storms are continually building and old ones are dying out. Storm motion kind of looks like that. You got a nice little flow. The other type of squall line, which you've probably heard, is called a derecho. A derecho is a long-lived wind event. We've seen some of these in the Carolinas. There's been many more in the Midwest. They're very common in the summer season, and they kind of ride around those big ridges of heat and high pressure in the summer. A derecho, by definition, means it has a large area of wind damage of 58-mile-per-hour winds or higher over a 250-mile long path. So these things, when I lived in the Midwest, you would see these come through the Great Lakes, and they would just knock down huge swaths of trees. The big one in Iowa, I think it was now 3 years ago, was basically the equivalent of an inland hurricane. It produced 140, 150-mile-an-hour winds all through Iowa and caused all kinds of damage. These can happen in the middle of the night, too, which makes them kind of scary because they just go forever. And the probably most famous type of thunderstorm, which is the one that gets all the publicity and gets all the glamour, is the supercell. The supercell is the storm that produces tornadoes. This is your classic hook echo, and the cells we see it most often in the plains. We do see them here in the Carolinas, but they look a little different. They're not always classic. They are individual storms all by themselves. And what makes them supercells is they have rotating updraft. The rotating updraft is what makes them dangerous. The structure of a supercell is, to me, it's actually a really beautiful structure. And if you ever get a chance to go storm chasing, just seeing one of these out in the plains is pretty spectacular because you can see everything in this graphic I've seen it in real life. It's like something out of a textbook. And when you see it in the sky, it all makes sense because you can see the updraft, downdraft, a mesocyclone, which is the rotating updraft. You can see the leading edge. Sometimes you'll see the wall cloud and the tornado coming out of the back. But the structure is really, really easy to see. See if we can get this to work. So if you're on the phone, there's this amazing animation I pulled up, and I'm gonna let it play out here. It'll play. There it goes. So this is a simulation of an EF5 tornado forming. It's a computer animation of real data, and it's probably not going to play now. Let me see if it'll play. Come on. Oh, here we go. So this really shows kind of the formation of a supercell and its then ensuing tornado. Supercells can be the size of the whole county. So imagine a storm that's the size of all Mecklenburg County. The supercell's updraft can not only drive wind into the high atmosphere, sometimes into the stratosphere. We'll get what's called stratospheric intrusion with the updraft, and that can actually bring down really strong winds to the surface. So think about that's sometimes 80, 90,000 feet in the sky. And then the mesocyclone will produce the tornado. The tornado is really tiny in comparison to this big storm. The tornado is only maybe half a football field wide, and the storm is taking up the whole county. So you can see on the graphic, it's pretty impressive to see that little tornado kind of forming underneath the mesocyclone. Now, the way tornadoes really get their power is they take broad circulations and they shrink them. That vorticity shrinking drives the speed of the tornado. So if anyone ever played tetherball? Okay. Here's a cool thing about, you played tetherball. What happens when the rope gets really short on the pole? It goes faster, doesn't it? Right? Okay. This happens in Mother Nature as well. If you take a broad circulation and start shrinking it down, it spins faster and faster. This is how figure skaters do those incredible spins. You might see them. They'll start their spin and they'll pull their arms in and they'll get really narrow and it'll make them spin faster and faster. This is the conservation of angular momentum. It causes things to spin faster. So in Mother Nature, the whole thunderstorm's rotating, and if it shrinks that rotation down to the size of the tornado, it spins at 100, 200, 300 miles an hour. So that kind of rotation can be pretty intense, and that's when you see these violent tornadoes. Types of supercells, low precipitation supercells. We don't get many of those here in the Carolinas just because it's so humid. These happen in the high plains, like think of eastern Colorado, New Mexico, Wyoming. These are beautiful storms to photograph because there's not much rain. There's just this beautiful structure. The tornado might be all by itself, and might not be any rain. Sometimes I've just seen hail and a tornado and no rain because the air is so dry. We typically get what's called high precipitation supercells. Those are pretty self-explanatory. I think if you've ever driven in a summer thunderstorm, everything feels like a high precipitation supercell because these are the types that have that tremendous rainfall rates, and usually the tornadoes are wrapped in rain. You can't see a thing. And that's why tornadoes here, I love to chase tornadoes, but here in the Carolinas, they're impossible to see because, first of all, there's trees and hills, and then they're all rain wrapped. So sometimes it looks like a dark cloud, and all of a sudden you realize it's a tornado by the time it's over. So chasing here is really hard. These are very common. Classic supercells, we do get these here in the Carolinas, but sometimes we get supercells embedded in squall lines. This is way more frequent. There will be a squall line, and within the squall line will be an embedded supercell. This can make for some really tough forecasts because you might have a big severe thunderstorm warning, and then inside you might have a tornado warning because we're starting to see these individual rotations. Sometimes on the leading edge of these squall lines, we'll actually have a couplet or a tornado. So just because it's a squall line doesn't mean we couldn't see rotation in it, and it does happen quite a bit. I've seen these quite a bit here in the Carolinas, mini low top supercells. These are small little storms that don't look like they're doing anything, and they'll produce tornadoes. This happens a lot this time of year in the spring and in the fall. We'll get these mini little supercells. So here's a graphic that kind of shows all of these different types of supercells. I wish it was straightforward. We could just tell you, here's one type of storm. Now, these are all the kinds that we get, and all of them, you really don't know if they're a supercell unless you look at the radar data and the velocity data together, and you can see that's rotating. What makes it a supercell is a rotating updraft. And you can't really tell that without looking at radar. Here's some actual pictures of supercells from some chasers, and then the tornadoes they produce. So they are pretty amazing. If you've ever seen like the mothership kind of view, this looks like a giant spacecraft landing. That's usually a supercell thunderstorm, and it's got that mothership is actually the mesocyclone. That's the rotating updraft. There actually will be striations in it sometimes. Here's a little diagram, kind of shows what it looks like. The other thing about these supercells is they have this phenomenon on the backside called the RFD, or the rear flank downdraft. When you take all that warm, humid air and push it up to the top of the storm, it's got to come back down. And sometimes it comes out of the back as a very strong downburst called the rear flank downdraft, or RFD. And that can cause more damage than a tornado, to be honest with you. So a wall cloud, these are things I would want you guys to spot if you ever see one of these. What's a wall cloud? Well, a wall cloud is kind of a lowering underneath that rotating updraft. Sometimes wall clouds are tough to see. You can't really tell if it's just a low-hanging cloud, but usually it's because it's persistent that you know it's a wall cloud. It's not transient, which means it's not there for a while and goes away. It's there, and it's the only thing. The base of the cloud is flat except for this little thing hanging down. Wall clouds are important because that's the precursor to a tornado. So when we see, or I get a report of a wall cloud, I'm going to be hyper-focused on that storm immediately. So a funnel cloud. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. A funnel cloud is obviously, it's a rotating column of air, but it's not in contact with the ground. I think when you see funnel clouds, it's not necessarily a tornado yet, but it could be. It could be touching the ground eventually, but if it's not, it's a funnel cloud. And the only way you know it's not touching the ground, you got to see all the way to the ground. So the other problem around spotting here, I might see a funnel cloud and trees are blocking my view of the ground. I have no idea if it's touching the ground. So if you were to report that, be honest, say, hey, I see a funnel cloud, but I can't tell if it's touching the ground. This is the direction I'm looking. Tornado, pretty self-explanatory. It's got to be in contact with the ground. It's redundant to say a tornado is on the ground but that's the definition of a tornado. It's on the ground. If it's not on the ground, then it's a funnel cloud. So they're two different things. Sometimes tornadoes, though, don't look like they're on the ground, except that you look down at the surface and you see debris swirling around. One of the first tornadoes I ever saw was in Ohio, and we didn't even know it was a tornado at first. We saw the wall cloud. It was in one of those mini supercells coming at us. The base of the wall cloud was rotating. We're like, ooh, this thing's going to produce a tornado. And it was coming right at us, and we were idiots because we were in the wrong spot. But it was coming at us because we're thinking, oh, this thing might produce a tornado. But it was in the spring, so we had a freshly plowed soybean field. It was just dirt. But when it moved over this field, all of a sudden, there was a funnel there, and it filled full of dirt. It became this big, dark tornado. The thing is, remember, a tornado is just a rotating column of air. If there's nothing in the air to see, you can't see it. So if it's really dry, you don't get a condensation funnel. Sometimes it takes debris to go into there for you to see it. So we realized right away that was a tornado the whole time. It just didn't have any debris to make it visible. So always look at the ground. I've seen tornadoes that are rotating up here. It's invisible, and then at the ground you see a bunch of stuff swirling around. That's a tornado. They can be detached. Rotating wall cloud usually comes first, funnel cloud, and then tornado. It's usually the process. So that's why the wall cloud and funnel cloud are important. The whole point of us warning for tornadoes, is to tell you before they form. Tornado warnings, believe it or not, there's like a 70 to 75% false alarm rate. And that sounds really bad, right? The problem is you're trying to forecast that the tornado is happening. You don't always know for sure. That's sometimes a reflection of we don't have good data near the ground because of the radar, but also because we see the rotating storm, we see a wall cloud, and so we issue a warning in anticipation that there's going to be a tornado, and sometimes it doesn't happen. So the whole point is to forecast a tornado, so you're going to overwarn for tornadoes in most cases. You'd much rather have a false alarm rate than have the probability of detection be low, which means you didn't warn for actual tornado on the ground. So we have a high false alarm rate, but most tornadoes do not go unwarned. It still happens, but it's pretty rare, especially in this day and age. So just some tornado genesis. process animations here to kind of show you how it works. So the way tornadoes typically form is we have a lot of strong wind shear, and wind shear is wind changing direction with height. So at the ground where we are on a day where I think there's going to be tornadoes, the winds could be coming from the south. But if you go up to 10,000 feet, the winds could be coming from the southwest or the west. So the wind is changing direction with height. Now, if it's clear, that's not a big deal. But if you get one of these thunderstorms that go up to 30,000 feet, now the thunderstorm is impacted by that changing wind direction. It causes the whole thunderstorm to rotate. And that's what creates the updraft that rotates and creates a supercell. And then you get the whole process of that rotation getting tighter and tighter and working its way down to the surface. So here's a quick animation of how that process works. Down at the ground, we might have strong surface winds. Aloft, we get these horizontal rolls developing, and then the updraft comes in and rotates that column on its end, and we get a wall cloud and then a tornado. So the two main ingredients, if there's a big tornado day, I can tell you two ingredients that will be off the chart. Wind shear and that thunderstorm fuel, the cape, because that's the updraft. Those two things, those are the days we have the worst tornado risk. So in the spring, that's the worst time of year because the jet streams are really strong still. We've got a ton of wind shear, and then we're starting to see these days like today where it's 85, 86 degrees. The only thing we didn't have today is humidity. It's really dry. It's beautiful out right now. It's not muggy. So if it was a really hot, humid day, we had wind shear with a cold front approaching, then tornadoes would be a big issue, which actually happened last night in Oklahoma City. That storm produced like 9 tornadoes south of Oklahoma City. So the way a radar looks on radar, you can see the rotation on radar, but with modern Doppler radar, we can actually confirm a tornado's on the ground. How do we do that? The radar, unfortunately, can actually pick up the debris that's being picked up by the tornado. So oftentimes, the worst, like to me, watching the radar is sometimes can be really scary. Back in Mississippi last month, I was watching this rotation on the radar, and it went through this town of Armour, and I could see the reflectivity jump up. And I just, the reason you could see it was because parts of houses were showing up on the radar. Because the radar beam bounces effectively off a 2x4 shingle insulation. And you can see that on the radar, and you know right away that there's stuff being picked up. And that's a scary sight on the radar. And sometimes you can see the debris lofted to 15, 20, 25,000 feet, which tells you how strong the tornado is. So, yeah, you can confirm a tornado with modern Doppler radar. Unfortunately, that doesn't do a lot of good because, the people it's hitting, it's impacting, but you can warn people in the next county or the next town over. And so a lot of times people are like, why do you want damage pictures and videos? Or why do you want these reports? Well, yeah, you might not be able to help the people that were impacted there, but this is going to help somebody, the next county over, seek shelter. Because human nature is you like to confirm your threat. And confirmation isn't me on TV saying there's a tornado warning. I wish it was. It honestly isn't. What is more confirmation is somebody seeing a picture of a house destroyed, the tornado actually on the screen, or something happening. Then it becomes real to people. Otherwise, it looks like the radar looks like still paint on the map. And let's be honest, if you don't know what you're looking at, you don't know what to be scared about. Like looking at an x-ray, your doctor has to tell you, this is bad. It's like, well, yeah, this is not looking good. I'm going to skip this one because it's not planned too well. But, oops. What's that? The tornado? So, yeah, basically what happens on the radar when you get a tornado, you get red and green, bright colors next to each other. That's the velocity. But the reflectivity gets really bright, like really heavy rain, because it's not heavy rain or sleet or hail. It's actually objects. So it'll have a really bright return. So the tornadoes are rated on the EF scale from 0 to 5. So the weakest tornadoes are EF0, the strongest are EF5. Thank goodness EF5 tornadoes only make up 1% of all tornadoes. So those monster tornadoes that you see, that are devastating towns, those are horrible, but they're very, very rare. Those are the type of storms that are on the ground for 2 or 3 hours. Think of Moore, Oklahoma, Xenia, Ohio, Joplin, Missouri, Tuscaloosa, Alabama. I could name a ton. Most of ours are the 0, 1, 2 scale. And it's important to know that the EF scale is not something you can do in real time. it's a damage assessment. You have to look at the damage after the fact, the rate of the tornado. And the way they're rated is they use a combination of engineering and meteorology. So you go out and you look at storm damage and you see, okay, this was a cedar tree, it was debarked, or it's a oak tree and it was bent over. We know structurally and engineering wise the physics of what it takes to do that to a tree. You can calculate the wind speed. You look at a building. Is it a cinder block building? Is it a mobile home? Is it a frame building? Then you know what kind of damage it does. Is there scarring of the ground? So there's these damage indicators that help us figure out what the actual damage was. Here's an image that shows a large tornado. Even within a large tornado, there might be different damage indicators within it. You might have EF0 damage and EF5 damage all in the same path. Tornadoes are really interesting because we get 1,300 a year in the United States on average, which is more than any other country in the world combined. We live in the tornado capital of the world. In fact, people from other countries come here to study tornadoes because we get so many. So it's unique to the United States. We don't get these many tornadoes in any other country. And it's just because our geography. If you think about the geography of North America, we have continuous land to the Arctic. We have continuous land to a tropical body of water, the Gulf of Mexico. And in between, we have two mountain chains on either side of the country. And it funnels everything into the middle of the continental United States. We get tornadoes. So tornado safety. I preach this all the time. I do this every school talk I go to. I preach this. Where's the best place to be in a tornado? Well, the most interior room in the middle of your house. Okay? As many walls between you and the outside. This is a weird statement, but it's not the wind that we're worried about. It's what the wind picks up and throws at you. So unlike the Wizard of Oz and Twister, it's very unlikely you're going to get sucked up by the tornado and carried to Kansas. What is more likely is something is going to get picked up and hit you in the head. Okay, 80% of fatalities in tornado are head trauma. It means you get hit in the head with something. So what we want to do, those walls block the debris from hitting you. If you're in the lowest floor of your house, people don't think of this, but the ceilings and floors above you are walls as well. They protect you from above. So they're layers of protection. And then lastly, we want you to have a helmet. Okay? Bike helmet, skateboard, I don't care, motorcycle, any kind of hard hat, doesn't matter. Whatever protects your head from falling is going to protect your head from stuff hitting you. And that's where my job comes in. So days ahead of time, when I say, Thursday's a day to be weather aware, right? You hear me say that. That means it's a day to go get the helmets, clean out the closet, and put them in there. That's kind of what we do in our house. I mean, I'll go clean the closet out. We might have tornadoes. Just in case, throw the helmets in there. And that way, when the average tornado warning is only about 11 minutes, in 11 minutes, you don't want everyone to look around and what do we do or where do we go? You should already know. You should just go and do it. So that interior room, and the reason that interior room is really important is it's not just something we say. If you're looking at the graphic, this happened with the storms that just occurred in Mississippi as well. I see the damage and it's devastating. My eye is completely drawn to a building where the interior room is the only room still standing. And I see it all the time. There's a picture right here. This is from Oklahoma. Interior room, the only one standing. That's a survivable room. Bathrooms are great, half baths, because the plumbing in that room is usually anchored into the foundation or the slab or the basement. And those pipes will actually keep that room intact, more so than another room. So half baths on the first floor are really good. Staircases are really well done in the middle of the house. All those load-bearing walls, the more of them you have in the middle, the better, because those are the most protective rooms. So definitely do that. Other things to bring in there, bring your charger and your phone, because you're going to want to watch the coverage. And I'm going to do this more and more. This is something we don't do enough. Tell you when to leave. Go to that room and then, okay, coast is clear, come out. We don't do that well enough. That's been my goal for the last couple of years, is to give people more the all clear. Because when we had the tornado back in 2020, in that February one, you guys remember I went from like Pineville to Matthews, actually went through my backyard. I heard these horror stories of people in Uptown, like in the stairwell for 2 hours. Like, what were you in the stairwell for? They heard a tornado warning, they just stood in there and waited and waited. I'm like, well, at some point, it's over, right? But I guess because there's not enough all clear signals given, right? Schools, some of the schools, they were in there doing their right thing. They were in their safety location, but they were there for like an hour and a half. Tornado was gone like an hour ago. is people. So we're going to do more of that. One of the things to think about too, and I think more and more, is make sure you have a pair of shoes in there. You're like, why do I need a pair of shoes? Well, if your house is damaged or destroyed, you're going to be climbing out through nails, broken glass, whatever. Don't be in bare feet. Have a pair of shoes, because a lot of injuries happen after the tornado because of debris. People get electrocuted, they step on nails, they cut themselves. And remember, those things may not seem that serious, but first responders are not going to be able to come and stitch you up right away. They're going to be responding to a lot of other things. So getting help for a simple injury might be a much bigger task after a tornado. So don't put yourself in a situation where that could happen. So this is a big thing I want to focus on, are tornado lookalikes. Okay, I get so many pictures of tornadoes that are just scud clouds. Everyone thinks every low-hanging dark cloud is a tornado. And 90% of the time, it's I like to call them SLCs, scary-looking clouds. Scary-looking clouds are all what they really are. There's low-hanging clouds. You got to remember, when it's really hot and humid and there's thunderstorms, there's a lot of up and down motion in that storm. So clouds are always going to be moving up and down. That's kind of, we call thunderstorms convection because it's a convection current. You expect that. What we're looking for is things rotating horizontally, very close together and rapidly. So things slowly moving around aren't that really big a deal. Think about it. If it's moving slow, that's not that what's the wind speed? 10, 15 miles an hour? It's not. If it's dangerous, it's going to be moving at highway speeds or faster. So think about that. And some of the things we see, a lot of the steam from the nuclear power plants, on certain days when the steam cloud gets up and connects to a cloud, we'll get tons of reports. There's a tornado at the lake. It's been there for 4 hours. I guess it's a steam cloud coming from the cooling towers. And the other thing, it's like, oh, it's just water. It's just a cooling tower. So it's not all that dangerous. The other thing is sometimes smoke from a fire will go up and people will see the smoke plume, and we call them smoke nados because people think it's a tornado. But you see stuff like that a lot. In the mountains, you see sometimes those wispy clouds coming off the mountains after a heavy rain. Those little fracas clouds, we call them, sometimes get mistaken for tornadoes. So the biggest thing is to watch it. Is it rotating violently? Then you know it's a tornado. And the best thing to do is, in that situation, video is much more valuable than a still picture, because I can't see movement in a still picture. I could see a cloud that looks like a wedge and it's gone like a second later. You can't detect that in a picture. Any still picture can look like a tornado pretty easily. The thing that helps is the video. So if you can, send video clips so people can see if it's rotating or not. The other thing is, things need to, not that it doesn't happen, it's pretty rare. All tornadoes typically rotate clockwise or counterclockwise. So think of a counterclockwise spin. If it's spinning clockwise, which is rare, we call that, anticyclonic. That's kind of rare, but if you see that, that's probably not a tornado. Some other things that are pretty cool, and you see a lot of these here, shelf clouds. These shelf clouds are amazing, right? And you've seen these. It looks like a giant wall of clouds coming. This comes with these big thunderstorms in the summer, where cool air rushes out and meets warm air, which lifts up. It looks like a wave coming at you. This really looks like an Independence Day cloud, right? You ever saw the movie? Like this giant wall. These can be really scary looking, and sometimes they can be severe. They can be an indication of really strong straight line winds, but a lot of times they're not. It's really not all that bad. You've seen a lot of viral videos online of these. Sometimes they produce these little fingers. For some reason, grocery store parking lots tend to be a popular location for scary clouds, but you people that spend all this time chasing in the planes, you just got to go to the local Publix and take pictures of clouds, because that's apparently where they all are. But these shelf clouds are pretty ominous looking. And this is how they form. I think I animated this. So a shelf cloud is essentially cool, dry air coming out of the back and the warm, humid air going up and over it. So that's the process that's forming that. It's basically the cool air is forcing the warm air up and it's creating the cloud. And that happens quite a bit around here. Other clouds to look at: downbursts, shelf clouds, wall clouds, scud. Believe it or not, that one in the corner there, that's the kind of picture I get where people are like, that's a tornado. No, not a tornado. Scud cloud. Just a scud. Those things will be moving all over the place sometimes too. And even trained spotters can be tricked. The whole point of that is like, don't look at it for first glance. Take some time to watch it. And then you'll know, like, oh, it might dissipate in 3 or 4 seconds. And then you're like, oh, I guess that wasn't a tornado. But scud clouds are the most common thing I see around here where people just mistake them. So hail, I was going to do a hail demonstration. Maybe I can do it now. So hail is pretty cool. Hey, can you hold this mic for me? That's what I'm here for. All right. I'm going to yell really loud so you guys can hear me. Everyone who wondered why this leaf blower was here, this is why it's here. Okay. So hail is pretty. Am I going to get hurt? Yeah. You have liability? No. Yeah, so thanks. So the way hail forms is pretty cool. I'm always fascinated by hail, and that the fact that it only can happen in the summertime, really. To think about that, it could be 90 degrees at the ground, and you could have hail coming down. It kind of blows people's minds. But the way it happens is you need moisture that's liquid at the bottom of the cloud to get blown up to a part of the storm where it's cold enough to freeze. But the ice will freeze. It'll fall down and get wet again, get blown back up, get another layer of ice, come down, get wet again, and get blown back up, get another layer of ice. It'll go through this convection current as many times until the hail's big enough where the updraft can't hold it up there, okay? And then it'll fall to the ground. But there's a key thing about that updraft. The updraft can't be vertical. So think about if something goes straight up and gets cold and comes back down, they'll cancel each other out. The updraft and down. So you want to tilt. So I do this little experiment all the time to show it. So I'm going to put my mic down again. Unless you want to hold this. So if you have a piece of hail and you push it straight up, it'll come back down pretty quickly. But the key to getting big hail like this is softball size hail, is to have a tilt to the updraft. So watch as I tilt the updraft, how it stays up there for long enough until it falls. So we'll make it go up, and I'm going to tilt the updraft, and it still stays up there, okay? And there's a very fine line until it falls out. That tilt, it has to be just right where it's enough to keep the current going, but not let it fall out. Now, what hail does, and this is huge hail, this hail is gigantic. It's like softball. This would be 4.5 inch in diameter. This is the biggest hail ever recorded in North Carolina. It's like 4.5 inches, okay? To get hail this big, you need an updraft that's like 100 miles an hour going up to keep that up there. But what's cool about hail, don't ever go out in the hailstorm because this hurts. Trust me. I've been chasing and been pelted by baseball-sized hail, and it is not fun. But this hail, once it's on the ground, if you go outside and break it open, you'll see rings in the hail. So each ring will tell you how many cycles that it went through. So if there's 4 or 5 rings, it went through that cycle 4 or 5 times. It's like a tree ring. It tells you the life cycle of that hail. So real small hail may not have a ring at all. It might just be one. But big hail, it'll look like a gobstopper on the inside because it'll have those rings. Really cool. But hail's the worst thing. I mean, I'll tell you a story. When I was chasing in college, we were in the middle of like Wichita Falls, Texas, in the middle of nowhere. And this giant hailstorm, which you're in the wrong spot chasing if you're in a hailstorm, and I was. And the car's getting pummeled. The windows are shattering. The side mirrors are getting blown off. It sounded like somebody had a sledgehammer in their car beating it. And the whole time this is happening, it's just deafening in the car. And there's next to us is a field full of cattle. All the cattle are just getting bludgeoned, right? They're falling over left and right. And the crazy thing was, after the hailstorm was over, I would say about 75% of those cows got back up and walked away. But the crazy thing was, it was a rental car, which I highly recommend getting the coverage if you ever do this. But it's funny, a lot of chasers are blackballed by the rental car companies for this reason. But it obliterated the car. It's just a helpless feeling to be in the middle of nowhere. There's no protection, and your car just gets destroyed. And so I hate hail for that reason, because the sound and the helplessness of being in that hailstorm, because there's nowhere to go. You can't drive. You can't see. Out there's very few trees. There's no overpasses. We're in a rural part of Texas, you know, and so it's a horrible thing. And if you have a nice car, there's nothing worse than watching that nice car just get dinged up by baseball or golf ball size hail. So here's a little animation of how the hail works. Hopefully it plays. There we go. So you get that updraft. you get those pieces of ice that keep going up and down, and you see the rings that form as it goes up and down over time. And there's a direct proportion to how big the hail is and the strength of the updraft. So, for instance, the baseball, would be more like in the 70 to 80 mile per hour updraft. And as I mentioned, this is over 100 miles an hour. I don't have my golf ball. Golf ball is close to 50 to 60, but pea-size hail can form like from 35 to 40 miles per hour. So it really can be pretty small hail. And so a good comparison chart, I should say, for hail chart here kind of shows you, if you don't know what a 1/4 inch peas are a good size, 3/4 inch pennies, 1 inch is about 1/4. Ping pong ball is about 1.5 inches. Golf ball is about 1.5 inches to 1.75 inches. So a lot of people don't have measuring tools when you're giving us hail reports. Just tell me what it looks like. I've gotten like crazy things like hen egg. I don't know. Somebody like gave me one time, there was big hail somewhere and someone said it looked like a CD and nobody knew what a CD was. And so it was really confusing. So something that we can compare it to, usually balls are really effective, or fruit or vegetables, something that's pretty, and also money, coins work really well. And remember that the Weather Service and us, even though if it's not 1 inch, which is severe, I like knowing about any hail because usually big hail starts small and it gets bigger as the storm develops. So even reporting pea-sized hail is really important. So there's a good example of reporting. Hail spikes on radar are pretty cool. You can actually, obviously we can detect hail in the storm, but what happens sometimes when there's really big hail, because you're talking about big chunks of ice, it'll bend the radar beam and you'll get these hail spikes. It's kind of an artifact of the radar. And when you see them on the radar, it's like a glitch, but it's a glitch that tells you there's big hail in that storm. So it's a really effective tool. I'm almost out of time. I got 15 minutes. I want to leave time for questions. I'm trying to blow through this. Okay, so we talked about a lot of severe weather. Probably not the most important thing, though. Flooding is. Flooding is the #1 killer of all weather, right behind heat. My daughter was asking me the other night, I think they're studying disasters in school. She's like, Dad, what do you think is like the most dangerous natural disaster? And she was trying to say like earthquakes or whatever. And I said, you know what? It's two opposites. I said, it's probably going to be drought and flooding. Because if you think about how many people it impacts, drought impacts agriculture and kills millions of people in Africa, all in parts of Southeast Asia all the time. And flooding kills way more people. And then heat's up there. People don't think about heat. Heat waves are really dangerous. You think about all the other severe weather, but those are the things that do cause a lot of damage. So flooding is a big issue. Lightning, even though there's no technical severe criteria for lightning is a really dangerous thing. Every thunderstorm by definition has lightning in it. And one thing, and I know you guys all know this, but I just say this, and I know you're an umpire, so you deal with this. I've been at some baseball games where I've heard dads, oh, I heard thunder. There's no lightning yet.
Time now to connect the dots, and we make the news make sense. Whether you can't get enough or can't wait to throw it out in the trash, everyone has a strong take on candy corn. But there's no denying it is a Halloween staple.
Why is candy corn the most divisive of all Halloween candy? Let's connect the dots. Love it or hate it, candy corn is a staple of Halloween. The tri-colored triangles bring strong responses from its fans and even stronger reactions from its critics. Since it has no contrasting flavors, it can end up just tasting intensely sweet. That can cause palate fatigue, like eating spoonfuls of sugar. There's also the matter of bugs in the candy. The lac bug produces a waxy, waterproof coating used in things from paint to food. It's usually called confectioner's glaze, and it gives candy corn that shiny exterior. But if you are on Team Candy Corn, you're not alone. According to USA Today, 9 billion kernels are produced annually. And you can expect to pay more for candy this year. Data Assembly, a retail price tracker, says prices are up 13% this year. And that's connecting the dots.
Time now to connect the dots when we make the news make sense. More folks are taking sick days at work, and now it's costing companies millions. In recent years, COVID and RSV have forced some folks to take more sick days, but employers aren't sure that's the whole picture. Let's connect the dots. New payroll data shows Americans are taking more sick days than ever before. Managers and HR execs say this is due in large part to a shift in mentality from younger employees. And it's a culture shift that's been years in the making. Unlike generations past, where workers would have to come into work sick because they were worried they would seem weak or unreliable, younger workers are bucking that trend, getting their rest to feel better. And for the first time, folks are using sick days for their physical and mental health. It's all to help combat things like stress and anxiety. And that is connecting the dots.
With your help, WCNC Charlotte is making a difference in our community.
Beautiful day, so many people helping. This is incredible.
Let's spread that love tonight.
Here is a $5,000 check that you guys can use to further the mission.
There is nothing on earth like the feeling of giving back with your hands.
$5,000 to you and Block Love Charlotte for what you guys do.
If you'd like to make a difference, go to WCNC.com/make-a-difference now.
Right now at 6, a brand new Where's the Money investigation serving as a lesson in renters' rights. Thank you for joining us now for the news at 6. I'm Colin Mayfield.
And I'm Vanessa Rufus. A group of college students scrambled to find an off-campus apartment, but when they moved out a year later, their landlord sent a bill of $23,000.
And the reason for most of those charges, well, the property owner didn't like a table that they made.
I take picture of
Of what?
You spit.
Where?
Okay, you write it up.
Saying something doesn't make it legal. Well, we've discovered now this landlord has a history of concerns just like this.
Our Nate Morabito learned property owners could face steep fines of their own for trying to collect fees that are not spelled out in a lease nor allowed by the law.
This $23,000 bill lists 21 charges in all, some for cleaning the apartment and the yard. But then there's a more than $18,000 fine, all because the students refused to remove a drinking game table.
Don't mind the Halloween decorations we have up.
When Tyler Parziale started his junior year at NC State,
you entrust with your children this life experience.
His mom, back home in Charlotte, gave him the freedom a college student wants, with some parental oversight.
What's the lease? Send it to us. We'll review it. We'll sign it.
But once his parents did their part, the rest fell on Tyler.
A lot of people my age and a lot of people in this position would bend easily.
They've clearly raised an independent child.
He was well within his means to stand up for himself and not be taken advantage of.
This homemade drinking game table is at the center of a back and forth between Tyler and his now former landlord.
She hated that table.
A property owner he says made living here difficult.
$23,000.
And leaving.
3 zeros, yeah.
Costly.
The charges were ridiculous.
A joint investigation by WCNC Charlotte and WRAL News revealed when their lease ended. Not only did Tyler's landlord refuse to return his security deposit,
exterminator dispatched to get rid of rodents due to trash accumulation.
She tacked on hefty fines.
A ruined microwave.
A continuation of a much smaller previous collection attempt when she warned of a possible breach in the lease agreement.
This is a personal preference thing, not an actual piece of trash in your yard.
Through it all, the table Tyler and his roommates built remained a sticking point.
She eventually paid someone late at night to come try and take it from us.
So much so, they chained it up so her worker couldn't take it. As a result, she charged him and his friends $150 for the worker's failed trip, plus $50 a day for an entire year for refusing to remove unallowed patio furniture.
Like over 20 grand. I've never seen something like that before.
Isaac Sturgill is with Legal Aid of North Carolina.
Landlords can't just make up fees and start charging them.
He says the nonprofit law firm routinely files civil claims against landlords who indiscriminately try to collect fees that either aren't agreed upon in a lease or authorized under the law.
The penalties are actually pretty steep.
Sturgill says North Carolina's unfair debt collection law can force landlords to pay anywhere from $500 to $4,000 per violation when held accountable.
Where in the law or in the lease allows you to charge them for that?
The landlord in this case, Lisa Eustatio, told us by phone, while the fee amounts were not specifically in the lease, she defends her decisions, saying it's her right to ask renters to remove something she doesn't consider appropriate, describing the table as disgusting.
She thinks she's the law.
Records show this isn't the first time she's tried to recoup money at the end of a lease.
Slam the door on me.
Sending a letter with thousands of dollars worth of charges to 2 additional groups of students who rented other homes. In those cases, parents say the landlord also kept their security deposits.
It's a name that, as soon as you say it, I know it.
Michael Avery is an attorney with Student Legal Services at North Carolina State University.
For such a small amount of properties, we certainly see an inordinate amount of complaints.
He says the nonprofit has remained aware of this particular landlord for nearly 15 years, a property owner who he says is largely unresponsive to concerns.
Probably the most common complaint that we see from students is they allege that there's been unjust, unlawful, and sometimes even fraudulent claims against the security deposit.
My son knew what his rights were.
Carrie Parzielli says she's proud of Tyler for standing his ground. As they refuse to pay the bill,
I'm angry because my child had to live that on a daily basis.
Tyler has moved on.
It was just a wave of relief.
And moved in to a new place.
I was at peace for once.
And he says his homemade table isn't causing any problems here. We requested an on-camera interview with that landlord. Neither she nor her attorney responded to our request. Nate Morabito, WCNC Charlotte.
A really eye-opening piece by Nate Morabito there. We did want to note we learned about this story because someone involved with this story reached out to me about this, and then I took it to our Where's the Money team. So we just want to really highlight that any tips from you at home, this is what sparks solutions journalism. We want to get answers for folks who need them.
And that's part of the job, of course, and why we do what we do each and every day. So we are asking you at home, if you have something that you think our team should investigate just like this, doesn't matter how small, send it to us. You can send an email directly to our team, too. That address is money@wcnc.com.
Well, this school year has been one filled with change, much of it not stemming from inside the classroom, but instead handed down from state lawmakers. North Carolina schools have seen a wave of new legislation impacting the classroom. It ranges from what kind of books teachers are allowed to have to what kind of conversations they can have with students. WCNC Charlotte's Shamaria Morrison joining us now after speaking to students and the superintendent about how these new laws are impacting education. Shay, what laws did you talk to them about?
Well, Jane, one, the Parents' Bill of Rights and restrictions on LGBTQ students tied to legislation that had been passed this year. And we discussed how state and local politics is sometimes a distraction for some students.
In an exclusive one-on-one interview with WCNC Charlotte, CMS's Superintendent Crystal Hill says she recognizes politics' place in education.
I have an understanding of the way that politics plays into K-12 education. We have an elected school board, we have elected legislators, we have an elected governor.
And all those elected positions come with cost for education. West Charlotte senior Malachi Thompson says students are not blind to the spotlight on education in politics.
Oftentimes we forget about the students' voices, and all we do is remember the parents and the teachers, but students have stories too.
Sharing student stories is why Thompson is part of Superintendent Hill's student advisory team.
My first encounter with her was she asked me a question. She said, "What does the students want?"
Thompson says political decisions by the General Assembly have hurt his classmates.
I share a classroom with some of our LGBTQ community, and they just don't feel safe.
Over the summer, state lawmakers filed 6 bills aimed at transgender youth, ranging from sports to medical care. Previously stalled legislation that limited LGBTQ+ instruction in North Carolina public schools was also passed this year.
They don't feel safe, they don't feel heard, they don't feel seen. And most of our students don't feel seen in the classroom. So once we provide that opportunity for them to be seen, heard, and viewed, then they can feel comfortable to sit in their classrooms and learn.
Hill has previously said the district will follow the law while making sure all students still feel welcome. She tries to keep her hands out of politics and in the classroom.
I think the best way to do that is keep the main thing the main thing. Schools were designed and developed to impact positively student achievement. Plain and simple, right?
And the district has already seen a hiccup with new laws enacted by the General Assembly. An email circulated to a few school principals, actually, Jane, telling them not to participate in banned books weeks, and that is due to the Parents' Bill of Rights. And this received actually international attention. CMS eventually backtracking, saying they were not taking a position on banned books week, and that participation in it was not a violation or in any way associated with the Parents' Bill of Rights.
All right, so they are being heard eventually, and you brought a lot of that to light as well.
Yeah, we always want to hear from the students.
That's right. Thank you, Shay.
Verify, WCNC Charlotte.
Verify is all about trying to make a difference in the community by making sure that the community has the correct information. This is what we know, and hey, this is what we don't know. Sometimes you're actually surprised by the answer.
Verify the difference.
Verify is a great way to combat that misinformation, making sure that people know the process of the reporting.
Alrighty, it's time to connect the dots when we make the news make sense. Scary movies are a classic Halloween tradition for some, but a popular technique used to scare folks in films is slowly going away.
Horror film fanatics say a common way to scare the audience is becoming almost funny. Let's connect the dots. So for years, movie makers have used jump scares to frighten the viewer. And you've all seen it, the technique that involves that sudden change in an image or the loud sounds that get you out of your seat. Jump scares peaked from the 1970s to about the early 2000s, with cult classics using the technique every couple of minutes. But they're slowly going away. Jump scares in movies has actually dropped since 2014, hitting a 20-year low in 2021. Experts say today's horror lovers can easily recognize the setup for a scare, and it's almost funny to viewers. So it means producers have to get a little more creative and spend less time on those big scares. Today's thrillers focus more on tension building and grabbing the viewer psychologically with scares that linger well after the jump. And that's connecting the dots.
Right now, though, let's talk about a big issue. In Mecklenburg County, on any given night, as many as 3,000 people don't have a place to sleep. And this is a crisis prompting local nonprofit, the Lotus Campaign, to seek solutions.
That's right. WCNC Charlotte's Lexi Wilson joining us live now. And Lex, how exactly does this nonprofit help?
Well, the Lotus Campaign puts people who are homeless into housing by removing barriers. It's something that at times seems impossible, especially if someone has a record. Homelessness has many faces and many stories. This is Mario Johnson.
At times I felt like, just giving up, what's the use, because my situation wasn't improving.
Johnson has been to prison for several charges, including robbery. His drug addiction started at 13, and before last year, he was homeless.
I never truly had a place to myself.
A place to himself, now possible.
It was just like a gift that was dropped in front of me.
Johnson is part of the Lotus Campaign's landlord participation program. Lotus guarantees landlords rent. In return, they eliminate things like credit checks and employment records.
Most of the residents that are coming through Lotus Campaign on paper are not going to look as great. They might have spotty rental history, maybe poor credit, there could be an eviction.
At the same time, they partner with social service groups to provide ongoing support for people like Johnson, who still works with Hope Haven, an organization helping people battle addiction.
What we're all about is building a strong network of support and also getting rid of roadblocks to housing.
Over the last 5 years, the Landlord Participation Program has housed more than 410 people in Charlotte. They've also supported over 200 lease renewals. The program has a 97% success rate, which means 97% of tenants go on to house themselves without support.
He'll protect me.
Johnson just re-signed his lease for another year in East Charlotte. Inside his home, a sign reads, "Don't quit."
The Lord is my strength and my shield.
He says he's grateful to be rebuilding his life with his family.
Everybody deserves a second chance.
And the Lotus Campaign also tries to put their tenants in neighborhoods where they can gain upward mobility. Reporting live for WCNC Charlotte, I'm Lexi Wilson.
Hey everybody, good Monday morning. Chief Meteorologist Brad Petovich here. Big changes on the way, and it's all going to happen on Halloween. I know we're getting lots of questions about rain, good news on that standpoint. We need the rain. I wish we get a lot more, but it is not going to impact trick-or-treating. So don't get scared off by looking at your app or these other things. The big story is going to be the cold temperature. So let's get right to the cold front, which is really going to show you what's happening. This is the cold front. You could see it heading our way. There is a lot of moisture with it right now, but as it gets to the east, there's just less and less moisture for it to work with. I do expect rain on Tuesday, but a lot of it's going to be in the morning till about lunchtime. And then we get into the afternoon and evening hours, that rain should move out. Will it be completely gone? Probably for the most part, but there could be some areas of drizzle or mist. There's certainly no washout, no heavy rain, nothing that's going to be like an all-day type of setup. So don't get worried about the rain chances tomorrow. We actually could use a lot more than what we're going to see. There's the cold front. I mean, that is just stunning when you look at the amount of cold air that's moving in. We'll probably tie a record high today. The record high is 84. We tied it yesterday at 83, so pretty good chance we'll tie it today. And that while we're not going to see record lows, that's not exactly how cold it is behind this front. We could see some of those interesting, what we call record low minimums, which means record low cold high temperatures. So low 50s on Wednesday could be pretty close to that, but you can see the dramatic change. I mean, that is a huge cold front. We'll be up in the 80s again today. It's going to feel like spring, and then tomorrow the bottom's going to drop out. Let me quickly show you the temperature forecast quickly from today through tomorrow. Okay, so today we're in the low to mid 80s, and then look at the drop. Tomorrow will be a weird day where the high temperature is going to be whatever it is at midnight tonight. So at midnight tonight, I expect it to be in the low to mid 60s. So that will be the high for your Tuesday. The low temperature is going to be what it is at 11:59 p.m. tomorrow night before midnight. So when you see the high and low temperature, it's really deceiving. A lot of apps give you the wrong low temperature. They give you the temperature for the next day instead of for that day. And you were typically used to seeing the high temperature happen in the afternoon and the low temperature in the morning. Tomorrow it's going to be flip-flop. The high temperature is going to happen while you're sleeping, and the low temperature is going to happen while you're probably out trick-or-treating with your kids. That's the kind of cold air heading our way. So let's get right to the future cast and kind of time out this rain. I'll show you exactly when it moves in. All right, so let's time out this rain for tomorrow. So clearly the cold front's coming in. It's going to arrive sometime after midnight into the early morning hours. So we'll go through today. Could even see some showers make it to the mountains this evening. So just a heads up for folks in the mountains. I wouldn't be surprised to see a few sprinkles or showers after dinner time tonight. But we get into the overnight hours. You can see some of the rain moving in. This is at 9 p.m. tonight. Again, look how scattered the rain is. It is pretty isolated. So even some rain before midnight tonight. We go into the wee hours of the morning. It does look like a secondary surge of moisture for when you wake up. So when you wake up on Halloween morning, you're going to see rain. Temperatures are going to be plummeting. It's going to be chilly. As we get into the middle of the day, we'll stop this right around 1 o'clock. You can kind of see the back edge is already starting to push through. And by the time we get to about 3 o'clock, you know, the heavy stuff's already gone and the cold air is rushing in. So what's happening is cold, dry air is filtering in, even though the front is here. The mechanism for the rain is going to be some moisture trying to ride up and over the cool air. Remember, the cold air is really shallow, so it'll be a weird situation where the cold, shallow air comes in first, and then warm air is still trying to ride up and over it. But you can see by the time we get to trick-or-treating time, I expect from around Raleigh to Columbia, the back edge of the rain, and this will likely be dry with maybe a sprinkle, and it gets better. I mean, as time, you could see going east that the sprinkles are pretty much light across the Charlotte area. The heavier rain in eastern North Carolina, South Carolina. So sorry for folks there. You're probably going to be dealing with rain for trick-or-treating, but on the backside, you won't. Also notice, yeah, this air is so cold. Yeah, that is snow, possibly moving into the mountains early on Wednesday morning. Would not be shocked to see some snow flurries to wake up on the first day of November. Not out of the ordinary for this time of year. And then the cold air settles in and we get ready for possibly the first widespread frost or freeze of the season for just about everybody. So if we break down the rain chances tomorrow, you can see right here, I'm going to put the cursor over. So they peak around 40% in the middle of the day, and then by trick-or-treating time, dropping down to about 10 or 11, 12%. So clearly the middle of the day is going to be the main rain chance, and then it gets better as evening. Let's talk about temperatures quickly. So as I mentioned, today we'll possibly have a record high. The record's 84. We'll be close to tying. Anything you see a circle, that means there's close to a record high. The squares mean one of those record low, cold, high temperatures. So you can see today, low 80s. Tomorrow, we're in the mid 50s as the cold air moves in. But the real cold stuff is Wednesday. So Wednesday, you see some of these square boxes. These are temperatures. These are the highs, by the way, not the lows. The highs for Wednesday could barely be cracking 50, and that could be close to a record low maximum, we call. So basically the coldest high temperature for that date. Their overnight lows will be pretty chilly as well. We go into Thursday, we're back in the mid 50s, so a couple days in the 50s. And then by the time we get to Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we're back in the 60s and 70s. So it's not all crazy cold. We are going to see a return to even a little bit above normal because the average high is now in the upper 60s, so low 70s. Let's talk about the low temperatures, though. I'm going to talk about those because the low temperatures, again, will be approaching probably a freezing mark in many areas, especially on Wednesday morning. So this is Wednesday morning. A couple spots could be close to record lows, but I do expect the first widespread freeze of the season for the Carolinas inland areas away from the coast on Wednesday and possibly again on Friday morning. So 2 mornings in a row, Thursday and Friday morning, where we're close to the freezing mark. That's close to our average first date, which is November 8th for Charlotte. So just be prepared if you have the vegetable garden still going or those tender plants. This is the first real legit widespread freeze of the season. We'll likely see freeze warnings and watches issued at some point today or tomorrow for the middle of the week. So good news, we're going to see the rain out of here in time for trick-or-treating, but just prepare the kiddos now because it is going to be brutally cold as we go into the evening hours, and there'll be some wind on top of that.
WCNC Charlotte.
Weather is a kind of science that you get to see and experience every day. And I think some people don't even realize how much it affects them. That weather has a huge impact on how it threatens your family, your livelihood, or your home. So I think it really is one of those defining things we do that really affects everybody in our community.
See the difference.
That process of giving you a warning ahead of time and keeping you and your family safe is really important to me because I live here too. It's my family, it's my friends, it's my neighbors.
Construction work heading to the town of Waxhaw, and it is forcing some detours to the town's busiest roadways. This all happening on Election Day as well. WCNC Charlotte's Miles Harris talked one-on-one with the town mayor, who has more on how drivers can avoid those major delays.
Waxhaw's mayor getting the word out about some road changes that could impact transportation as early as Monday. But his message going far beyond just the roads, but about being on the same page as the community.
So we want to make sure that the 20,000 plus cars a day that go through this intersection can get around our town to allow our people to get into our town.
Mayor Ron Pappas says that town leaders are working with railroad operator CSX and the NCDOT with a plan to keep traveling on Waxhaw's roads smooth, after CSX is getting set to do some maintenance work on the town's railroad crossing.
We all collaborated, got together, developed a different plan that helped us circulate the traffic through town with very little disruption.
The work is set to close the crossing at Route 16 and Broome Street, and the detours are encouraging drivers to take Gray Byram Road, Waxhaw Marvin Road, Waxhaw Indian Trail Road, Collins Road, and McNeely Road. Pappas says that sending out the traffic warning is a part of a bigger plan, connecting and growing with the Waxhaw community.
So we want to make sure that our residents know the process, which sometimes they don't like that word process, but everything in government is a process. And we need to help them understand the process better. You just can't be reactionary, you have to have a plan. I love this town. It's a great town. I love being down here. I live within walking distance. I like that. And our town is something that everybody else wants to enjoy as well, and we'd like to see them do that.
Construction is scheduled to start on Monday and will extend through November 7th on Election Day, which could impact voters' routes to the polls. In Waxhaw, I'm Miles Harris for WCNC Charlotte.
York County gave the green light for a Silfab solar manufacturing site to move into Fort Mill. But some people living in Fort Mill are worried about the impacts that kind of facility will have on water and air quality.
Manufacturing with HAPs needs to be further away from children.
HAPs, or hazardous air pollutants, are a major cause of concern, and the reason behind a public hearing tonight to hear neighbors' concerns. York City Council moved ahead with giving Silfab Solar a tax break to move in before any report was given from the South Carolina Department of Health and Environmental Control.
Don't expect this board to hold up a fee in lieu based off what DHEC is yet to determine.
Silfab Solar still needs permits from DHEC before it can begin operations. The plant would be located behind the DMV and near 2 public schools in Fort Mill. Residents concerned about the toxic chemicals that would be coming in and out of the plant are hoping to make their voices heard and stop operations before they begin.
Alrighty, 5:17 now. A fair warning, you may want to put your breakfast or your morning coffee down for this one. Happy Tuesday. We are once again talking about rats, so I'm going to try to hurry up and get through this. 4 cities across the Carolinas are now topping the list for rattiest cities. Now, before revealing the rankings, here's how researchers measure who's home to these rodents. Orkin, a pest control company, looked at the number of new rodent services in cities across the country. The ranking includes both residential and commercial pest control treatments. Now, right here at home, Charlotte, Raleigh-Durham, the Greenville-Spartanburg area, and Greensboro all break the top 50. The Queen City moved up 16 spots. It now holds number 21. Just under is Raleigh-Durham at 23. Greenville-Spartanburg takes number 32, but the Carolina city making the biggest jump is actually Greensboro. So Orkin says it moved up 17 spots. It's now number 50. For context, surprisingly, New York City is number 3 on the list, LA taking the second ranking, and Chicago comes in at number 1. Guys, this is the grossest news to see and the worst list probably to make.
Yeah, I'd rather just not think about that.
Well, you know what I say.
What?
We beat Raleigh.
Yeah.
So take that, Raleigh.
Come on.
That's right. That's what matters. All right, Kia, thanks.
You dirty man.
That too.
Listen, nothing dirty about our weather, nothing.
Time now to connect the dots. When we make the news make sense. Nowadays, it seems like almost everything can be connected to the internet. But there is a new warning about those devices and their ties to a hostile government.
An explosion of home smart devices could threaten U.S. national security. Let's connect the dots. From thermostats to doorbells, almost everything is connected to the internet. And leaders say they could have a tie to China. It's all thanks to a growing Chinese-made cellular module that allows devices to connect to the internet. And experts warn the consequences could be devastating, including cranking up AC units to shut down the power grid or taking control of self-driving cars. Now regulators are trying to protect you so you know what you're buying. The FCC working to add a label that signifies a product meets widely accepted cybersecurity standards, all to keep both consumers and U.S. infrastructure secure. And that is connecting the dots.
Wake up to the news that matters most with meteorologist and traffic reporter Chris Mulcahy.
And we're all clear. We're keeping you smarter, safer, and on time.
Start your day the Mulcahy way. See the difference. 4:30 to 7 on WCNC Charlotte.
Tonight, millions of dollars will be invested into Albemarle Road for pedestrian safety improvements. It's part of the city's Corridors of Opportunity program meant to uplift communities that are historically underserved. WCNC Charlotte's Julia Kaufman tells us how the funds will be spent in tonight's Where's the Money report.
Heavy traffic and jaywalking. Albemarle Road is filled with commuters, and according to city data, it's at higher risk of car and pedestrian crashes.
You definitely see that in Corridors of Opportunity having a higher number of those.
The city's Corridors of Opportunity program is making safety improvements in several underserved areas, including Albemarle.
Albemarle Road is part of the city's high injury network, so there have been multiple fatalities and serious injury crashes.
The city and state are greenlighting more than $3 million for the project in hopes of reducing the number of crashes.
There's a large population in Albemarle that are working and trying to safely get to jobs and are dependent upon transit and bike and pedestrian movement to get there.
The Albemarle corridor is getting 3 more of these pedestrian hybrid beacons, which offer a safe place to cross when there isn't an intersection.
We look to implement some of these projects to make it safer for people to cross and safer for people to move around on foot and on bike.
That also means closing sidewalk gaps and improving bus stops. Monica Holmes with the Corridors of Opportunity program says the upgrades go beyond safety.
Improving the public realm and really what the street looks like and how it feels and how easy it is to get around is an important aspect to help attract jobs to that corridor and more opportunities for employment in that area.
The city is getting most of the project money from NCDOT, but not until 2026. Construction won't start until 2027. Julia Kaufman, WCNC Charlotte.
WCNC Charlotte wants to hold government agencies accountable for how they use taxpayer money. So if you have something we should investigate, please email us the details at money@WCNC.com.
We were sent a series of questions by viewer Lori W. about the COVID-19 vaccine. So we're getting the facts and answering her questions about the new vaccine. Our source is Dr. Paul Coley, Yale Medicine, and the CDC. According to the CDC, the new COVID-19 vaccine targets a subvariant of the Omicron variant. The CDC says this should also work against other circulating variants. Lori W. wanted to know when should she and her husband get the vaccine because they want it to be most effective. Dr. Coley says if you're waiting to get your shots until November or December, you should rethink that decision.
Your peak antibodies are about 2 to 4 weeks after you get boosted, but they don't just go away after those 4 weeks. They actually have a plateau.
If people want to time their shot perfectly for holiday travel, Dr. Coley says now is the time to get your shot.
By Halloween, you'll have peak antibodies and you'll keep them through the Christmas time.
A study from Yale Medicine says the updated vaccines are not expected to prevent all cases of COVID. The aim is to reduce severe illness, hospitalization, and even death. According to the CDC, there was a surge in North Carolina COVID-19 hospitalizations at this time last year and in 2021, with most of the spikes happening around December. Lori W. also wanted to know how long the protection lasts. Dr. Coley says after the initial spike in antibodies 2 to 4 weeks after you get boosted, you'll start to plateau. After about 4 months, you'll start to see a decrease in those antibodies. And if you're wondering what time of day you should get your vaccine, Dr. Coley has an answer for that too.
So if you think about our immune system, it follows a circadian rhythm, and it's actually maximal when we're sleeping. So if you go in the afternoon to get your shot, that means that's really going to sort of kick in most when you're sleeping.
With your Verify Fact Check, I'm Megan Bragg.
If you have something you would like verified, just email us at verify@WCNC.com.
When it comes to WCNC's chief meteorologist Brad Panovich, our viewers tell the whole story.
Hey, if you're new to the area, this meteorologist is awesome.
I always stick with Brad Panovich when it comes to severe weather. He's rarely wrong.
You should follow Brad if you don't already. He's usually right on the money with his forecast.
I don't look at anything else besides what Brad says. We are fortunate to have him here.
Brad Panovich. Experience the difference with WCNC Charlotte weather.
Drivers roaming around Charlotte might notice a large orange device on the side of the road. In fact, a lot of people on social media are wondering about what this device might be. Well, here's Megan Bragg with this morning's Verify.
Have you seen these giant orange devices hanging around on the side of the roads in Charlotte? A lot of people on social media believe the device is taking photos of your car to see if you're texting and driving. But is this true? Are there actually devices placed on the side of the road in the hopes of catching people texting and driving? Let's verify. Our sources are the North Carolina State Highway Patrol and the North Carolina Department of Transportation. The North Carolina State Highway Patrol says they have 3 of these devices that they can place around the city. Their purpose: to catch commercial motor vehicle operators or truck drivers who are on their phones while driving. According to NCSHP, last year's fatal collision data shows most of the crashes happened because preoccupied truck drivers failed to reduce their speed or were drifting out of their lanes. NCSHP says these 3 devices combined cost $496,000 and were paid for with federal grants. We were told the image captured on the devices are not shared with any other law enforcement entity for any other purpose. And this comes on the heels of Governor Cooper proclaiming October 25th as Buckle Up Phone Down Day. Last year, according to NCDOT, 712 people died as a result of not wearing a seatbelt or driving while distracted. Since June alone, NC State Highway Patrol says troopers have issued 961 seatbelt violations and 565 handheld phone violations thanks to information from these devices. So we can verify that, yes, there are devices placed along the roads in Charlotte capturing images of people texting and driving, but according to law enforcement, they are monitoring the behavior of truck drivers and not other motorists. With your Verify, I'm Megan Bragg.
If you have something you would like verified, just email us at verify@wcnc.com.
When did you know what you wanted to be?
Hey, Mom, the weather's on!
WCNC Charlotte's chief meteorologist, Brad Panovich, always knew what he was meant to do.
All right, don't forget your umbrella.
In fact, he joined the American Meteorological Society when he was 13. Now Brad is all grown up. You can see him right here on WCNC Charlotte, making sure you're informed and safe.
Hey, where did all my hair go?
Experience the difference.
Hey everybody, good Monday morning. Chief Meteorologist Brad Panovich here. Big changes on the way, and it's all going to happen on Halloween. I know we're getting lots of questions about rain. Good news on that standpoint. We need the rain. I wish we get a lot more, but it is not going to impact trick-or-treating. So don't get scared off by looking at your app or these other things. The big story is going to be the cold temperatures. So let's get right to the cold front, which is really going to show you what's happening. This is the cold front. You could see it heading our way. There is a lot of moisture with it right now, but as it gets to the east, there's just less and less moisture for it to work with. I do expect rain on Tuesday, but a lot of it's going to be in the morning till about lunchtime, and then we get into the afternoon and evening hours. That rain should move out. Will it be completely gone? Probably for the most part, but there could be some areas of drizzle or mist. There's certainly no washout, no heavy rain, nothing that's going to be like an all-day type of setup. So don't get worried about the rain chances tomorrow. We actually could use a lot more than what we're going to see. There's the cold front. I mean, that is just stunning when you look at the amount of cold air that's moving in. We'll probably tie a record high today. The record high is 84. We tied it yesterday at 83, so pretty good chance we'll tie it today. And that while we're not going to see record lows, that's not exactly how cold it is behind this front. We could see some of those interesting, what we call record low minimums, which means record low cold high temperatures. So low 50s on Wednesday could be pretty close to that, but you can see the dramatic change. I mean, that is a huge cold front. We'll be up in the 80s again today. It's going to feel like spring, and then tomorrow the bottom's going to drop out. Let me quickly show you the temperature forecast quickly from today through tomorrow. Okay, so today we're in the low to mid 80s, and then look at the drop. Tomorrow will be a weird day where the high temperature is going to be whatever it is at midnight tonight. So at midnight tonight, I expect it to be in the low to mid 60s. So that will be the high for your Tuesday. The low temperature is going to be what it is at 11:59 p.m. tomorrow night before midnight. So when you see the high and low temperature, it's really deceiving. A lot of apps give you the wrong low temperature. They give you the temperature for the next day instead of for that day. And you were typically used to seeing the high temperature happen in the afternoon and the low temperature in the morning. Tomorrow it's going to be flip-flop. The high temperature is going to happen while you're sleeping, and the low temperature is going to happen while you're probably out trick-or-treating with your kids. That's the kind of cold air heading our way. So let's get right to the future cast and kind of time out this rain. I'll show you exactly when it moves in. All right, so let's time out this rain for tomorrow. So clearly the cold front's coming in. It's going to arrive sometime after midnight into the early morning hours. So we'll go through today. Could even see some showers make it to the mountains this evening. So just a heads up for folks in the mountains. I wouldn't be surprised to see a few sprinkles or showers after dinner time tonight. But we get into the overnight hours. You can see some of the rain moving in. This is at 9 p.m. tonight. Again, look how scattered the rain is. It is pretty isolated. So even some rain before midnight tonight. We go into the wee hours of the morning. It does look like a secondary surge of moisture for when you wake up. So when you wake up on Halloween morning, you're going to see rain. Temperatures are going to be plummeting. It's going to be chilly. As we get into the middle of the day, we'll stop this right around 1 o'clock. You can kind of see the back edge is already starting to push through. And by the time we get to about 3 o'clock, you know, the heavy stuff's already gone and the cold air is rushing in. So what's happening is cold, dry air is filtering in, even though the front is here. The mechanism for the rain is going to be some moisture trying to ride up and over the cool air. Remember, the cold air is really shallow, so it'll be a weird situation where the cold, shallow air comes in first, and then warm air is still trying to ride up and over it. But you can see by the time we get to trick-or-treating time, I expect from around Raleigh to Columbia, the back edge of the rain, and this will likely be dry with maybe a sprinkle, and it gets better. I mean, as time, you could see going east that the sprinkles are pretty much light across the Charlotte area, the heavier rain in eastern North Carolina, South Carolina. So sorry for folks there. You're probably going to be dealing with rain for trick-or-treating, but on the backside, you won't. Also notice, yeah, this air is so cold. Yeah, that is snow, possibly moving into the mountains early on Wednesday morning. Would not be shocked to see some snow flurries to wake up on the first day of November. Not out of the ordinary for this time of year. And then the cold air settles in and we get ready for possibly the first widespread frost or freeze of the season for just about everybody. So if we break down the rain chances tomorrow, you can see right here, I'm going to put the cursor over. So they peak around 40% in the middle of the day, and then by trick-or-treating time, dropping down to about 10 or 11, 12%. So clearly the middle of the day is going to be the main rain chance, and then it gets better as evening. Let's talk about temperatures quickly. So as I mentioned, today we'll possibly have a record high. The record's 84. We'll be close to tying. Anything you see a circle, that means there's close to a record high. The squares mean one of those record low, cold, high temperatures. So you can see today, low 80s. Tomorrow, we're in the mid 50s as the cold air moves in. But the real cold stuff is Wednesday. So Wednesday, you see some of these square boxes. These are temperatures. These are the highs, by the way, not the lows. The highs for Wednesday could barely be cracking 50. And that could be close to a record low maximum, we call it. So basically the coldest high temperature for that date. Their overnight lows will be pretty chilly as well. We go into Thursday, we're back in the mid 50s. So a couple days in the 50s. And then by the time we get to Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we're back in the 60s and 70s. So it's not all crazy cold. We are going to see a return to even a little bit above normal because the average high is now in the upper 60s, so low 70s. Let's talk about the low temperatures, though. I'm going to talk about those because the low temperatures, again, will be approaching probably a freezing mark in many areas, especially on Wednesday morning. So this is Wednesday morning. A couple spots could be close to record lows, but I do expect the first widespread freeze of the season for the Carolinas, inland areas away from the coast on Wednesday and possibly again on Friday morning. So 2 mornings in a row, Thursday and Friday morning, where we're close to the freezing mark. That's close to our average first date, which is November 8th. For Charlotte. So just be prepared. If you have the vegetable garden still going or those tender plants, this is the first real legit widespread freeze of the season. We'll likely see freeze warnings and watches issued at some point today or tomorrow for the middle of the week. So good news, we're going to see the rain out of here in time for trick-or-treating, but just prepare the kiddos now because it is going to be brutally cold as we go into the evening hours, and there'll be some wind on top of that.
Early voting is underway in the Carolinas, and don't forget, in both Carolinas, voters will have to show a photo ID. If you do not have one, you can use a provisional ballot. In South Carolina, early voting ends on November 3rd. In North Carolina, it's the 4th, and Election Day is November 7th.
And as early voting continues across the Carolinas, there's concern this election, like many local races, won't draw a big crowd. WCNC Charlotte's Kaylin Hagwood has a closer look at efforts to fix this exact point.
There are some things you come to expect on Election Day.
The crowds and the groups and sometimes the lines.
Low voter turnout for local races is one expectation officials are hoping to see change.
The more national or the federal elections, you'll see a lot more participation.
According to the nonpartisan research group Fair Vote, low turnout is often attributed to political disengagement and the belief that voting will do little to change public policy. Not understanding how to register, having an approved ID, or transportation also contribute, according to the National Civic League.
So people know that they want to vote for candidate X or candidate Y, and so they go out and make sure that they do that. But municipal elections are as important, if not more important, on a daily basis.
TJ Lundeen with the South Carolina Election Commission says early voting can help by providing more time. But the National Civic League says there is no quick fix. It believes a mix of strategies, including changing local elections to even years to pair with major races and increasing outreach among underrepresented groups like college students and people of color, can help. Also, an old-fashioned reminder.
As an American, voting is a great right and a real privilege, very important for all of us.
Kaylin Hagwood, WCNC Charlotte.
Well, life in Lewiston, Maine is starting to get back to a new normal after last Wednesday's mass shooting. This morning, investigators continue to search for a motive. People gathering this weekend for candlelight vigils and prayer services to remember the 18 victims killed at a bar and bowling alley. Police found the suspect, Robert Carr, dead Friday night a few miles away from Lewiston. Police say he shot himself. The Associated Press reports that just last month, police sent out a statewide bulletin about Carr. Police say they tried to find him for a wellness check, but were never able to locate him.
You know, if you talk about, is there a motive here, right? I think clearly there's a mental health component to this. We still need to do some research around trying to get access to certain records and things of that nature, which again, you could probably imagine is not just as simple as just calling somebody, hey, can you send me this thing?
A Lewiston hospital says 3 shooting victims still in the hospital in critical condition. A 4th is unstable.
Now, this latest mass shooting in Lewiston, Maine is now being followed up with, of course, the debate over gun laws. So Forbes broke it down like this. The shooting comes just weeks before the Supreme Court hears a landmark gun rights case that could weaken rules on who owns guns. The case we're talking about is the U.S. versus Rahimi. Now, more on the key facts. The law in question bars people from owning guns if they have domestic violence restraining orders against them. Rahimi, the defendant in this case, carried out a series of shootings while he had such an order against him. And here's the hang-up. Lower courts are mixed on how constitutional domestic violence laws actually are. And depending on how the court rules, there could be a ripple effect on other gun regulations, like provisions that keep groups like drug users from owning firearms. Now, rules keeping guns from felons, though, those should remain untouched. The court is going to hear these oral arguments on November 7th, but any decision in this case isn't likely to come out for at least a few months. That could be any time before the court's term ends in June of 2024.
The new and improved WCNC Plus, now on Roku and Fire TV. Watch local live newscast, get extended breaking news coverage, and see local programs and specials. The new and improved WCNC Plus, now on Roku and Fire TV.
The news at 11, I'm Vanessa Rufus.
And I'm Colin Mayfield. $72 million over the next 18 years. That's exactly how much money Mecklenburg County is getting from the national opioid settlements.
The county is dishing out its first installment of grants to 15 local organizations. And WCNC Charlotte's Julia Kaufman tells us how one group will use the money to seek solutions for addiction.
Hope Haven helps about 300 adults and their families a year with counseling, housing, and support services for addiction.
They have a lot of things to overcome as they're trying to get back on their feet.
Getting back on your feet may mean finding a job and a home.
I hadn't had a job in like 20-some years, so I got to Hope Haven, right?
Now Barbara, sober for 5 years, is looking to buy a home of her own.
I asked for help. You can't do it by yourself. You can't do it by yourself. You got to have help.
Hope Haven will soon help more people thanks to a $400,000 grant from Mecklenburg County's Opioid Settlement Fund.
All of that money is going to go toward recovery support services and employment.
President Kristen Bilson says the money will mean more staff to help with case management and training opportunities for residents to get higher paying jobs. It's great news, but Bilson adds there's much more work to do.
We still have a crisis of fentanyl, of the drugs on the street that are just making this so incredibly dangerous and so deadly.
According to Charlotte Mecklenburg Police, overdose deaths increased by nearly 20% in Charlotte from 2022 to 2023. Bilson says education is needed to erase the stigma around addiction and save more lives.
There's so much stigma around this disease, and I think a lot of these opioid funds are really going to help shine a light on this and bring a lot of awareness to it.
Julia Kaufman, WCNC Charlotte.
Well, people are sounding the alarm after a number of bizarre incidents on a South Charlotte greenway. CMPD says in the last 48 hours, it has received over a dozen calls about a man exposing himself on the 4 Mile Creek Greenway. WCNC Charlotte's Austin Walker joining us live from there tonight. Austin, people tell you this has been happening for weeks, though.
Yeah, so people have been saying that their neighborhood group's been posting an alert about this, saying a man has been coming up to them and also exposing and touching himself inappropriately. Obviously, a serious situation, and now they're just searching for answers from CMPD. A situation unexpected by many.
Immediately shocked and a little horrified.
In the last 48 hours, CMPD says they received dozens of calls about a man exposing himself to people at the 4 Mile Creek Greenway in South Charlotte.
It is sad, but unfortunately, it's our reality.
But for Seema Teig, she's walked the Greenway weekly for the last 5 years, and there's been moments where she's felt unsure and unsafe.
One time I just, walked by and I had this feeling. I looked back and the guy who was sitting on the bench was standing up with his camera pointing at me. And when I walked towards him, he just kind of ran away.
Here today to inform you all.
Moments like these aren't uncommon on Charlotte greenways. In the past 3 months, CMPD addressing a slew of investigations regarding sexual assault and indecent exposure, taking the time to address the public, offering tips on how people can stay safe.
Being on the phone with someone, not walking with headphones, to yell or scream if something happens.
Teague says she takes those precautions already, knowing a safe area can quickly change.
You just have to be vigilant. You have to walk around. You have to constantly look, just be aware of your surroundings.
So while awareness is key, people wish a walk on the Greenway could be as simple as just enjoying the peaceful escape of nature.
It reminds me of walking on the farm at home.
Now, obviously, if you know anything, CMPD asks for you to call 911 so they can get a suspect description so stuff like this doesn't happen anymore. For now, we're live in South Charlotte. Austin Walker, WCNC Charlotte.
Absolutely. Austin, thanks for that report. On Friday, Mecklenburg County Parks and Rec is introducing new signs on greenways to help walkers and runners better identify their location, hopefully to help with the situation we just talked about, but they can also help that with first responders and make sure that they can get there faster.
When I think about the community, I think about the time that I've been here. I've been in this community almost my entire adult life. So you get to know the people. When you know what they care about, then that's what you care about. This community looks at all of us who do weather here at WCNC Charlotte as part of their family. And when you're part of their family, you want to make sure you do it just for them.
All right, we're going to have much more on the Mallard Creek barbecue and its history here in the Carolinas.
The Mallard Creek barbecue has been a tradition in the community for 9 decades. But it's so much more than just a church fundraiser. Let's connect the dots. The barbecue first started back in 1929. The Mallard Creek Presbyterian Church was building Sunday school rooms at the time when the nation fell into the Great Depression. They couldn't afford to pay the contractor, so they hosted a barbecue to raise money. 90 years later, money is still raised to support local missions. But the barbecue is also a long-running political tradition. While this year's gathering is drive-through and carry-out only, traditionally it's been a sit-down meal to give candidates a chance to talk to voters. The event is always the fourth Thursday in October, just a few weeks away from Election Day, so voters can get a side of politics with their pork. And that's connecting the dots.
This Breast Cancer Awareness Month, WCNC Charlotte is highlighting the incredible stories of those who have been or are currently in that battle. The subject of tonight's story has gone above and beyond, devoting her life to rescuing dogs. But not just any dogs. Robin Young has a soft spot for pugs. She's turned her garage into a kennel to care for sick and unwanted pugs until they can be adopted out. But tonight, it's Robin who needs the care and healing. Our Larry Sprinkle brings us her story.
This is a story about some very special dogs, but most importantly, it's about the very special person who cares for these dogs.
Robin Young has spent her life helping.
That's a pretty girl. I care for people and I have this passion for pugs.
Helping people as a nurse. And helping homeless and abandoned dogs as the founding board member of Mid-Atlantic Pug Rescue.
My vision was that we met all of their needs before they went to their new family.
Much of this time has been fighting battles to do all of that.
Daisy's a great example. She needed a back surgery and her family couldn't afford it.
Now Robin is fighting her own battle. August 31st this year, 8 little puppies were dropped off at her home. They'd been left in a bag on the side of the road.
They needed to be bottle fed. They were so young at that point.
That same day, Robin had a screening and received a devastating diagnosis: breast cancer.
I'm busy. I don't have time for this. And he said, well, Robin, most people don't have time for cancer. And I said, no, you don't understand. I really don't have time for this.
October 4th, she had surgery.
Yes. And it doesn't just affect the person. It affects their family, their friends. And I needed someone to come and help me. Because he was like, you're not going to be able to drive yourself. You're not going to be able to do many things.
With Robin and a group of dedicated volunteers taking care of these little rescues, they've become part of the helping process.
These have been healing. They have been my little, when you have to sit and be still, they are happy to sit and be still with me. They are good therapy. They love you no matter what.
Nothing has kept her from all the needy pugs and puppies.
What do you say to anyone going through something similar?
You need to have a good attitude, I can, and I will, and I won't let this get me down.
With one amazing lady and lots of special dogs in Lancaster County, South Carolina, Larry Sprinkle, back to you.
Hey YouTube, this is Chief Meteorologist Brad Panovich here at WCNC Charlotte. We want you to head over to our Weather IQ YouTube page, where we're making you smarter and safer. We have a passion for weather science, and we want you to understand what's happening when the weather changes, because in the end, that's what keeps you safe. It's not about being scared, it's about being informed. Browse our collection of fun and informative clips and look for new segments every week. We're here to raise your weather IQ. Experience the difference on WCNC Charlotte.
Hey everybody, good Monday morning. Chief Meteorologist Brad Panovich here. Big changes on the way, and it's all going to happen on Halloween. I know we're getting lots of questions about rain. Good news on that standpoint. We need the rain. I wish we get a lot more, but it is not going to impact trick-or-treating. So don't get scared off by looking at your app or these other things. The big story is going to be the cold temperature. So let's get right to the cold front, which is really going to show you what's happening. This is the cold front. You could see it heading our way. There is a lot of moisture with it right now, but as it gets to the east, there's just less and less moisture for it to work with. I do expect rain on Tuesday, but a lot of it's going to be in the morning till about lunchtime, and then we get into the afternoon and evening hours, that rain should move out. Will it be completely gone? Probably for the most part, but there could be some areas of drizzle or mist. There's certainly no washout, no heavy rain, nothing that's going to be like an all-day type of setup. So don't get worried about the rain chances tomorrow. We actually could use a lot more than what we're going to see. There's the cold front. I mean, that is just stunning when you look at the amount of cold air that's moving in. We'll probably tie a record high today. The record high is 84. We tied it yesterday at 83, so pretty good chance we'll tie it today. And that while we're not going to see record lows, that's not exactly how cold it is behind this front. We could see some of those interesting, what we call record low minimums, which means record low cold high temperatures. So low 50s on Wednesday could be pretty close to that, but you can see the dramatic change. I mean, that is a huge cold front. We'll be up in the 80s again today. It's going to feel like spring, and then tomorrow the bottom's going to drop out. Let me quickly show you the temperature forecast quickly from today through tomorrow. Okay, so today we're in the low to mid 80s, and then look at the drop. Tomorrow will be a weird day where the high temperature is going to be whatever it is at midnight tonight. So at midnight tonight, I expect it to be in the low to mid 60s. So that will be the high for your Tuesday. The low temperature is going to be what it is at 11:59 p.m. tomorrow night before midnight. So when you see the high and low temperature, it's really deceiving. A lot of apps give you the wrong low temperature. They give you the temperature for the next day instead of for that day. And you were typically used to seeing the high temperature happen in the afternoon and the low temperature in the morning. Tomorrow it's going to be flip-flop. The high temperature is going to happen while you're sleeping, and the low temperature is going to happen while you're probably out trick-or-treating with your kids. That's the kind of cold air heading our way. So let's get right to the future cast and kind of time out this rain. I'll show you exactly when it moves in. All right, so let's time out this rain for tomorrow. So clearly the cold front's coming in. It's going to arrive sometime after midnight into the early morning hours. So we'll go through today. Could even see some showers make it to the mountains this evening. So just a heads up for folks in the mountains. I wouldn't be surprised to see a few sprinkles or showers after dinner time tonight. But we get into the overnight hours. You can see some of the rain moving in. This is at 9 p.m. tonight. Again, look how scattered the rain is. It is pretty isolated. So even some rain before midnight tonight. We go into the wee hours of the morning. It does look like a secondary surge of moisture for when you wake up. So when you wake up on Halloween morning, you're going to see rain. Temperatures are going to be plummeting. It's going to be chilly. As we get into the middle of the day, we'll stop this right around 1 o'clock. You can kind of see the back edge is already starting to push through. And by the time we get to about 3 o'clock, the heavy stuff's already gone and the cold air is rushing in. So what's happening is cold, dry air is filtering in. Even though the front is here, the mechanism for the rain is going to be some moisture trying to ride up and over the cool air. Remember, the cold air is really shallow, so it'll be a weird situation where the cold, shallow air comes in first and then warm air is still trying to ride up and over it. But you can see by the time we get to trick-or-treating time, I expect from around Raleigh to Columbia, the back edge of the rain, and this will likely be dry with maybe a sprinkle, and it gets better. I mean, as time, you could see going east that the sprinkles are pretty much light across the Charlotte area. The heavier rain in eastern North Carolina, South Carolina. So sorry for folks there. You're probably going to be dealing with rain for trick-or-treating, but on the backside, you won't. Also notice, this air is so cold. Yeah, that is snow, possibly moving into the mountains early on Wednesday morning. Would not be shocked to see some snow flurries to wake up on the first day of November. Not out of the ordinary for this time of year. And then the cold air settles in and we get ready for possibly the first widespread frost or freeze of the season for just about everybody. So if we break down the rain chances tomorrow, you can see right here, I'm going to put the cursor over. So they peak around 40% in the middle of the day, and then by trick-or-treating time, dropping down to about 10 or 11, 12%. So clearly the middle of the day is going to be the main rain chance, and then it gets better as evening. Let's talk about temperatures quickly. So as I mentioned, today we'll possibly have a record high. The record's 84. We'll be close to tying. Anything you see a circle, that means there's close to a record high. The squares mean one of those record low, cold, high temperatures. So you can see today, low 80s. Tomorrow, we're in the mid 50s as the cold air moves in. But the real cold stuff is Wednesday. So Wednesday, you see some of these square boxes. These are temperatures. These are the highs, by the way, not the lows. The highs for Wednesday could barely be cracking 50. And that could be close to a record low maximum, we call. So basically the coldest high temperature for that date. Their overnight lows will be pretty chilly as well. We go into Thursday, we're back in the mid 50s. So a couple days in the 50s. And then by the time we get to Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we're back in the 60s and 70s. So it's not all crazy cold. We are going to see a return to even a little bit above normal because the average high is now in the upper 60s, so low 70s. Let's talk about the low temperatures, though. I'm going to talk about those because the low temperatures, again, will be approaching probably a freezing mark in many areas, especially on Wednesday morning. So this is Wednesday morning. A couple spots could be close to record lows, but I do expect the first widespread freeze of the season for the Carolinas, inland areas away from the coast on Wednesday and possibly again on Friday morning. So 2 mornings in a row, Thursday and Friday morning, where we're close to the freezing mark. That's close to our average first date, which is November 8th for Charlotte. So just be prepared. If you have the vegetable garden still going or those tender plants, this is the first real legit widespread freeze of the season. We'll likely see freeze warnings and watches issued at some point today or tomorrow for the middle of the week. So good news, we're going to see the rain out of here in time for trick-or-treating, but just prepare the kiddos now because it is going to be brutally cold as we go into the evening hours, and there'll be some wind on top of that.
This change in weather often brings more sniffles, but many of the illnesses that come during cooler months like the flu and allergies have similar symptoms to COVID-19. WCNC Charlotte's Kaylin Hagwood spoke with Rowan County health officials on the importance of getting checked out.
When it comes to the sniffles and sneezes of the fall season, the cause may be harder to tell than you think. Courtney Meese is with the Rowan County Health Department. She says whether it's the flu, COVID, or seasonal allergies, similar symptoms could leave you wondering what's really wrong.
Some of the similarities, you're going to see some runny nose, some congestion, some difficulty sleeping, fatigue, possibly a sore throat.
The best thing to do? Talk to your doctor if you're really feeling under the weather. And
it's really important to make sure that we are testing and being aware.
While the flu spreads year-round, the CDC says the virus peaks between December and February. Getting tested for the flu or COVID can help you rule them out.
It could be COVID disguised, and we want to take the most precautions that we possibly can.
Getting your flu and COVID vaccinations can also help keep you well.
So it's better to test and find out for sure than to take a gamble.
Kaylin Hagwood, WCNC Charlotte.
We took to Google to see what people want to know about the flu season. We took a look at the top searches and went to the experts to verify.
Our source is family physician Dr. Carla Robinson, the CDC, and GoodRx Health.
The first question, does the flu vaccine actually contain the influenza virus in it?
One actually has a live version of the virus, but it's very, very weak.
Robinson says the vaccine with a small amount of the virus in it won't give you the flu because there's not enough virus to infect you. The CDC lists 6 different variations of the flu shot, some that contain the actual virus and others that do not. So we can verify that yes, some flu vaccines do have a very small dose of the virus in it. The next question, does the flu vaccine work right away? According to the CDC, your body needs about 2 weeks after you get the shot for antibodies to develop and provide protection.
Within that window, it is possible to get infected with some sort of, virus, upper respiratory infection, or even the flu itself.
So we can verify that no, the flu vaccine doesn't work right away. It takes about 2 weeks to kick in. And finally, how much is the flu vaccine if you don't have insurance? GoodRx, a company that provides discounts on prescriptions, tells us if you don't have insurance, the cost typically ranges from $25 to $90 out of pocket.
Those who are 65 and older have the option of receiving a higher potency vaccine, one that's a little bit stronger. Those tend to be a little bit more on the expensive side.
However, there are drive-up clinics in Mecklenburg County that offer the COVID and flu vaccines for uninsured residents at no cost.
Robinson says the best time to get your flu shot is now, so you're covered in time for the holidays. With your Verify, I'm Megan Bragg.
If you have something you would like verified, just email us at verify@wcnc.com.
At WCNC Charlotte, we believe it is crucial to make a difference in our communities.
That's why we go beyond just reporting the news. We ask, where's the money to hold the powerful accountable and get money back into your pockets?
Our Verify team takes claims, finds sources, and gets you answers.
And we're keeping you weather aware, making you safer and smarter.
I'm Vanessa Rufus.
And I'm Colin Mayfield. Join us weeknights at 5, 6, and 11 and see the difference for yourself.
Only on WCNC Charlotte.
The Uptown Fire Station has been a long-standing building for decades, but it may hold a spooky past.
Folks say some firefighters never left. Wake Up Charlotte photographer Ruben Wallace takes us inside.
My name is Sherry Neal. I'm the owner of Southern Charm Rides of Charlotte. There are so many ghost stories here. You would not think that Charlotte would have that many, but it does. This right here is fire station number 4. Being a former EMT, I am aware that you have to be ready when a call comes in. You have to be ready to go. So this fire station was built in 1925, and in 1934, Pruitt Black was at work. It was his last day of work, actually. It was April the 1st, 1934, and he was picking up an extra shift. That he got a call that day, actually that night, on his second shift. And when he got the call, he tried to hurry up and get to that pole and somehow got tangled up in the suspenders, fell to his death, where he cracked his skull at the bottom. And it is said that his spirit still lingers here in this fire station number 4. Now before that, Pruitt was very well known. He was into a lot of sports. There was a baseball team that the firemen would have together. He played in the sports a lot. And of his Christian faith, he never would smoke out in public. I smell that. I'm not sure I like that. In fact, he was the only one here that smoked cigars, so when people would come in, they would smell it and they would know Pruitt was here. A lot of people say that they smell this cigar and they think that the spirit's here. And we also had another haunted tour, and we kind of came together one night, and one was taking a picture in that far window up there on the corner, and she captured an image. I do believe, because there's just some things that are just absolutely unexplained.
Tonight, tens of thousands of North Carolina families are bracing for the worst now that federal funds for child